Imagine the hush of evening settling over a countryside road. The sun has long since lowered itself behind distant hills, leaving a faint trace of gold upon the clouds before slipping quietly away. A lantern glows dimly outside a small inn, its flicker soft against the mist that gathers along the lane. Somewhere nearby, a hearth crackles, wood splitting gently as it burns, filling the air with warmth and the faint scent of pine. The road is still, except for the murmur of a river winding beside it, steady and calm, as though it has followed these paths for The air holds a coolness, the kind that brushes lightly against the skin without pressing too heavily. It smells faintly of damp earth, of grass crushed beneath the day's footsteps, and of smoke drifting lazily from cottage chimneys. A dog barks, once in the distance, then falls silent. An owl, somewhere unseen, calls into Thedisk, its notes carrying across the fields with an unhurried rhythm. The countryside, with all its quiet sounds, feels like a vast, breathing presence, slow, patient, and timeless. In such moments, the world seems to slow down. One can almost imagine travelers from long ago, their figures cloaked against the evening chill, walking steadily along these worn paths. Their footsteps were soft upon the stones, their breath rising in mist that caught last shreds of light. Some walked alone, heads bowed in quiet thought. Others moved in small groups, speaking in murmurs or keeping silence together, united only by the steady rhythm of their pace. These weary pilgrims and their journeys were marked not by haste but by patience, not by grandeur but by endurance. Along their roads, stones were set down, markers of faith, of distance, of prayer. Some stood upright like sentinels, carved with simple crosses or weathered inscriptions. Others were humbler still, little more than rounded rocks placed deliberately at the edge of a field, yet each one served its purpose. They guided the way not only with direction but with presence, each stone carrying stories of those who had paused, perhaps to rest a hand against its cool surface, perhaps to whisper a hope, or perhaps simply to catch their breath before moving on. If you stand still long enough along such a path, you may sense the accumulation of centuries, generations of footsteps, each one small and ordinary, yet together weaving a tapestry of devotion. No single journey was remarkable on its own, yet the repetition, the endless flow of walkers over decades, even centuries, gave weight to the roads themselves. Stones, soil, rivers, hedges, all became infused with memory, not in the loud sense of history recorded in chronicles, but in the quiet way a groove is worn into a stair by countless feet. Tonight, we will wander gently down those same paths, not to arrive anywhere in particular, for the point is not the destination, but the noticing, the slow observation of stillness and rhythm. We will imagine the seasons as they touched the frost of winter tightening the ground, the soft green of spring returning life to hedgerows, the hum of bees across summer fields, and the scent of wood smoke drifting through autumn air. We will pause at the inns that once sheltered the weary, with their straw-stuffed mattresses, simple stews, and fires that glowed late in Taith night. We will consider the tools carried by travelers, the sturdy staff, the satchel, the shell stitched to a cloak as a symbol of intent. We will step into villages, where children fetched water, women spun wool, and blacksmiths shaped iron with steady hands. In each of these scenes, the stones will remain constant, silent companions to centuries of footsteps. They remind us that history is not only written in battles or courts, but also in the quiet persistence of ordinary journeys. A single stone along a road may seem unremarkable, yet it has seen more than any one traveler could, season after season, life after life, all passing quietly by. The lantern still burns outside the inn. Its glow trembles faintly in the mist, catching upon droplets of dew that gather on grass. The river continues its murmur, unconcerned with the passage of years. In the darkness, one might picture a pilgrim resting nearby, wrapped in a cloak, staff leaning against the wall, waiting for morning. Perhaps their thoughts are simple: how far until the next village, whether the bread will last until noon, how the weather may turn tomorrow. Or perhaps their mind is empty, lulled into stillness by the rhythm of the road. As you rest here tonight, you may find your own thoughts softening into that same rhythm. There is no urgency in these journeys, no need for drama or struggle. The road asks only for patience. Step by step, stone by stone, the way reveals itself not in sudden revelations, but in steady unfolding. And so, let the world of the pilgrimage roads unfold slow around you, Picture the quiet fields, the low hum of bees, the bell of a church tower in the distance. Imagine the gentle conversations by firelight, the touch of hand to stone, the steady turning of seasons. No haste, no urgency, only the calm rhythm of time and the simple act of walking. Close your eyes, if you wish, and let yourself drift with these thoughts. You are in no hurry. The stones will wait for you, as they have waited for centuries, guiding countless travelers before you. The road continues, steady and timeless, under lantern light, under frost, under blossoms, under stars. The hour before dawn has always carried a quiet weight. It is a time when the world seems suspended, when even the trees appear to hold their breath, and the smallest sound feels like a ripple across a vast silence. In Thekkentraizide of centuries past, this was the moment when many pilgrims chose to begin their journey. The air at this hour was cool, often damp with dew, and the roads shimmered faintly with moisture. Lanterns glowed dimly outside cottages, their flames unsteady in the mist, and smoke from hearth fires rose lazily into the darkness. Thestas still lingered above, though their light was faint now, beginning to fade before the approach of morning. A rooster might call from a distant farmyard, its cry echoing across fields still hidden in shadow. These were sounds and scents of departure, gentle markers of time's passage in the earliest hours of the day. The village from which a pilgrim departed was usually small, perhaps a cluster of cottages surrounding a church whose tower stood like a guardian over the fields. The cottages were simple, their walls of timber and clay, their roofs thatched and heavy with the weight of years. Inside, the warmth of embers still glowed faintly from the fire, kept to live overnight. Bread dough might already be rising on a wooden board, prepared by hands that worked half asleep, following the rhythm of routine. For most villagers, the day was only just beginning, but for the pilgrim, this was the moment of leaving, of stepping beyond the boundary of the known and into the uncertain road ahead. Departure was rarely noisy. Families would often walk with the traveler a short distance, their steps soft upon the damp ground. There were no grand speeches, no loud farewells, but only quiet words, a clasped hand, perhaps a whispered blessing. Some families prayed together, their voices blending with the hush of dawn, carried gently on the air. Then, at the edge of the village, they would pause. The pilgrim would continue alone, and those left behind would watch for a moment, their figures growing smaller with each step. The turning back was often the hardest part, yet it was softened by the knowledge that the journey was a noble one, guided by faith and trust. The road itself was never perfect. It wound its way between fields and hedgerows, some at a miss paved with stones, sometimes little more than packed earth. Rain had cut grooves into its surface, and cartwheels had left ruts hardened in the dry seasons. But beneath the unevenness lay the memory of centuries, for this road had been walked by countless feet before. Pilgrims trusted its course, following the direction laid out by both tradition and stone markers placed along the way. To feel those first steps upon the stones was to sense a connection, not only to the land, but also to all those who had walked it before. Each footfall seemed to echo faintly in the quiet air, as if the stones themselves remembered the weight of devotion. In these early hours, the senses became sharper. The smell of earth, wet with dew, mingled with the faint sweetness of hay, stored in the cool air brushed against the skin, carrying with it the promise of morning. Birds stirred in the hedges, their wings fluttering, though their songs had not yet begun. From time to time, a fox darted across the road, its body low to the ground, vanishing into the mist as quickly as it had appeared. These quiet details gave Thepilgrim company, filling the stillness with signs of life, reminding them that the world was never truly empty. The belongings carried were few. A pilgrim, often, had only a cloak for warmth, a staff for balance, and a satchel with bread, cheese, perhaps a handful of dried fruit or nuts. Some carried a small flask of water or wine, in order to sustain them until the next village. A shell might be stitched to the cloak, a visible sign that marked Thetrevella as one on a sacred road. Shoes were worn and patched, their leather softened by use, and each stone pressed against them was felt keenly. There was no space for excess. To carry too much was to burden the body, and to carry too little was to risk hardship. Balance, in both belongings and in spirit, was essential. These first steps before dawn were not merely physical. They carried deep meaning. To leave behind home and familiar comfort required courage. To walk toward an unknown horizon required Faith, the act of beginning, was itself a prayer, unspoken yet powerful. Some pilgrims muttered words as they walked, repeating familiar prayers softly under their breath. Others walked in silence, their thoughts drifting like the mist around them. The road allowed for both the rhythm of footsteps, the press of staff upon soil, the steady beat of heart and breath all became part of the prayer. The pilgrims' thoughts might wander to family, to the fields left untended, to the warmth of their hearth left behind. Yet with each step, those thoughts gave way to rhythm. The road demanded attention, not in urgency, but in constancy. A misplaced foot upon a stone could twist an ankle, so eyes watched carefully, and Thebede moved with steady patience. Soon, the pilgrim became absorbed by the journey itself, and worries softened into acceptance. Shrines or crosses often stood at the edges of roads, placed at crossroads or beside streams. These were small structures, simple and weathered, yet they held great meaning. Pilgrims would pause at them, some pressing a hand to the stone, others bowing their heads briefly. A flower might be left, or a pebble placid carefully at the base. These gestures were small, yet they gave strength. They reminded the traveler that they were not alone, that the path they walked was shared by countless others, and that each stone bore silent witness to faith. As the sky lightened, the world began to change. The deep black of night softened into blue, and the first pale light of dawn touched the tops of trees. Mist lifted slowly from the fields, revealing rows of crops and theatlines of hedgerows. Birds began to sing, their voices filling the silence with gentle music. The pilgrim walked through this transformation, moving from darkness into light, from stillness into sound. The road ahead beckoned, though it still wound away into the horizon, unseen and unknown. The first miles always felt longer than the body was fresh, but the heart carried weight. Questions lingered. How far would the road stretch? What challenges would come? How long before home would be seen again? Yet with time, these questions softened. The rhythm of walking took over, and the mind settled into a calm acceptance. The journey was not meant to be rushed. It was not about arrival, but about the steady act of moving forward. And so, the first steps bare for dawn were never hurried. They were slow, deliberate, and filled with quiet reflection. They marked the true beginning of the pilgrimage, not the decision made at home, not the preparations of food and clothing, but the moment when the road itself received the pilgrim's footfall. That moment, repeated across centuries, linked countless lives together. It was a moment of faith, of hope, of gentle courage. As the sun finally rose, spilling light across fields and villages, the pilgrim found themselves already part of the day's rhythm. Farmers began their work, children called to one another, and smoke curled steadily from chimneys. The road stretched on, its stones glistening faintly in the morning light. What lay ahead would come in its own time: villages, rivers, forests, seasons. But for now, the hardest part was complete. The pilgrim had begun, step by step, stone by stone, carrying both body and spirit forward into the long journey. The day would be long, but its beginning was gentle. And as the pilgrim walked, the stones bore their weight silently, as they had done for generations, as they would continue to do for centuries more. The first light of morning always arrived slowly, as if reluctant to disturb the peace of the countryside. It began as a faint glow on the horizon, a pale line between earth and sky, before spreading into soft shades of gold and blue. Dew clung to the grasses in countless droplets, each one catching the growing light like a tiny jewel. Thea, once cool and heavy with night's dampness, grew lighter, filled with the sense of earth and the quiet stirring soft day. For a pilgrim walking the road, this was a moment of both stillness and awakening. With each step, the world seemed to reveal itself a little more, as though the land wished to accompany the traveler into the long hours ahead. The road stretched forward, narrow and winding, its edges lined with hedgerows. These hedgerows were alive with sound, their leaves trembling with the movement of small creatures. Birds, shaken from their slumber by the touch of dawn, began their songs in earnest. Their calls echoed across fields and meadows, weaving together into a chorus that seemed older than memory. Some birds darted low across the road, their wings catching the light, while others perched high, hidden among branches yet filling the air with their voices. For the pilgrim, this song was both comfort and company, a reminder that the journey was shared, not only with her the travelers, but with all of nature itself. Beyond the hedgerows lay wide fields, their soil marked with furrows left by plows. In some places, young wheat rose in soft green shoots, bending gently in the breeze. In others, barley swayed with a rhythm like waves upon water, rising and falling. With each movement of the air, farmers, already awake, could be seen in the distance. They worked with slow, steady hands, guiding oxen, carrying tools, bending to tend the earth. Their figures were small against the vastness of the fields, yet their movements were full of quiet strength. Pilgrims passing by often lifted a hand in greeting, and sometimes a farmer would pause for a moment, leaning on a tool to watch the traveler pass, before returning to the endless rhythm of labor. The morning sun, climbing steadily, began to touch everything with warmth. Stones along the road glistened with dew, each one bright for a moment, before the droplets vanished in the growing heat. Shrines stood at intervals, weathered and simple, their surfaces smooth from countless touches of hands and lips. These small markers were more than stone. They were signs of presence, anchors of meaning in the vastness of the road. Pilgrims would pause at them, bowing heads, whispering prayers, or simply resting for a while in their shade. Some shrines bore carved figures, faint now from age, their outlines softened by time. Others were little more than rough stones, set and left to stand as silent guardians. Each held its own weight of faith, its own memory of those who had passed before. The rhythm of walking became easier in the light. Where the night had held mystery and uncertainty, morning brought clarity. Every stone, every blade of grass, every furrow of soil was visible. Revialitas, though the land itself wished to be known. The pilgrim could see the patterns of cartwheels in the dust, the footprints left by others, the small rivulets of water that traced their way down from higher ground. The road was not merely a path, it was a story written and rewritten each day by the movement of life upon it. To walk upon it was to read those stories in silence, to add one's own footsteps to the long line of history. Along the way, the pilgrim might meet others. Some were travelers like themselves, carrying staffs and satchels, their cloaks marked by the same dust. Greetings were exchanged quietly, often with little more than a nod or a few soft words. Conversation was rare, for the road demanded energy, and silence carried its own comfort. Yet even in passing, there was a sense of fellowship, a recognition of shared purpose. At times, villagers walked the road only for a short distance, carrying baskets of vegetables, leading animals, or making their way to nearby markets. Their lives intersected with the pilgrim's path for only a brief moment. But in those moments the road felt less lonely, its stones warmed by the presence of many lives. The morning hours carried a gentleness that could not be found later in the day. The sun, though climbing, had not yet grown harsh. Its warmth was soft, wrapping the traveler in light without burdening the body with heat. Breezes stirred across the fields, carrying with them the smell of damp soil, of herbs growing wild at the edges of paths, of flowers opening to the sun. Bees moved among blossoms, their steady hum joining the chorus of birds. The land felt alive, not only in sight and sound, but in scent and touch. To walk through it was to move within a living world, one that accepted the pilgrim's passage without question. The pilgrim's thoughts often wandered during these hours. Memories of home came easily in the quiet of morning. A mother's voice, a father's steady presence, the laughter of siblings, the warmth of Arathol. These lingered in the mind, softened by distance. At times, longing pressed upon the heart, a gentle itch for what was left behind. Yet alongside longing came hope, the belief that each step was part of something greater, that the road itself carried meaning beyond the weariness of the body. The shrines by the roadside gave shape to these feelings, offering places where thoughts could turn into prayer, where silence could be. As the sun rose higher, shadows shifted across the fields. Trees cast long lines upon the soil, and the road itself gleamed in places where the stones caught the light. The pilgrim's cloak grew warmer upon their shoulders, and the weight of the satchel pressed more firmly against the back. Yet the rhythm of walking carried its body forward almost without thought. One step followed another, and soon distance was covered without. The road stretched endlessly, but its length was softened by the steady measure of footsteps, by the company of the land itself. The fields, though simple, held countless details. Mice darted through the hedgerows, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Hares leaped across open ground, their bodies swift and graceful. Crows gathered upon freshly turned soil, their calls harsh, yet somehow fitting. as if they too belonged to the morning. Insects glimmered in the light, their wings catching the sun as they moved in swarms. Each detail reminded Thepelgrim of the abundance of life, of the way the world carried on with its rhythms regardless of human presence. The road did not pass through empty space. It passed through a living landscape, one that embraced the pilgrim with both beauty and challenge. From time to time, the pilgrim would rest. A stone wall offered a place to sit, or a tree provided shade. Bread might be taken from the satchel, broken into pieces, and eaten slowly while Gazinga crossed the fields. Water or wine refreshed the throat, its taste grounding the traveler in the moment. Rest was not wasted time, it was part of the rhythm, as essential as walking itself. To pause was to notice the world more fully, to feel the weight of the journey not as burden but as gentle reminder of effort. By mid-morning, the sun stood higher, and the road stretched on with new clarity. Villages appeared in the distance, their church towers rising above rooftops, their smoke curling gently into the sky. These sights brought reassurance. They promised shelter, food, and company ahead. Yet they also reminded the pilgrim that the journey was long, that each village weighs only a step along the greater road. The horizon always extended beyond reach, always beckoned with new. The fields, however, remained constant companions, their quiet labor of growth and harvest mirroring the pilgrim's own slow progress. The morning light revealed not only the land, but also the pilgrim's own inner state. Weariness mingled with hope, longing with courage. Each furrow of soil, each stone upon the path. Simito speaks softly of endurance. The fields did not hurry. They grew in their own time, season by season. Thepelgrim, too, learned to accept the pace of the road, to walk without haste, to let the journey unfold slowly. Morning light carried this lesson, shining not with urgency, but with calm persistence, guiding the traveler gently forward. And so, as the day moved steadily onward, the pilgrim continued along the road, passing fields, shrines, hedgerows, and villages. The stones beneath their feet grew warmer, the birds sang higher in the sky, and Thelen stretched endlessly around them. The companionship of morning faded gradually into the heat of day. Butit's memory remained, carried within the pilgrim's heart like a quiet blessing. The morning light had revealed not only the fields, but also the beauty of beginning, the strength of small steps, the calm of moving forward one pace at a time. By midday, the road often grew warmer, the sun climbing high in the sky and pressing its light upon the land. Pilgrims, weary from steady walking since before dawn, looked for rest where the road allowed. Sometimes it was under the shade of a tree, or beside a small shrine, but often it was in the welcome shelter of a wayside inn or cottage. These inns stood humbly along the roads, not grand or luxurious, but built with purpose, to offer comfort to the traveler who had given much of their strength to the miles already behind them. The inns were simple places, their walls built of timber or stone, their roofs often thatched and low. A wooden door, worn smooth by many hands, marked the entrance. Inside, the light fell gently through small windows, softened by oiled cloth or thin panes of glass, casting a warm glow across the room. The air smelled of smoke, of bread baking, and of broth simmering in an iron pot. These were familiar scents, comforting to those who had walked far, reminding them that shelter was never entirely out of reach along these pilgrimage roads. The hearth stood at the heart of the inn. A steady fire burned there, its flames licking at logs with patience rather than fury. Sparks rose now and then, fading before they touched the ceiling. Around it, benches and stools were gathered, inviting travelers to rest. The warmth of the fire was not only physical, it carried with it a sense of companionship. Acknowledged that many had sat here before, drying their cloaks, loosening their boots, and allowing their bodies a moment of ease. The crackle of burning wood filled the quiet spaces between conversation, a sound as old and familiar as the road itself. Meals were plain but sustaining. Bread, baked in round loaves, was cut thick and served with wedges of cheese. A broth, made from whatever vegetables and scraps of meat were at hand, simmered in the pot, ladled into wooden bowls when a pilgrim arrived. The taste was simple, sometimes bland, but to the hungry traveler it was enough. The meal carried more than flavor, it carried relief, the reminder that's body, tired from walking, could be nourished again. The sound of spoons tapping against bowls mingled with soft murmur of voices, weaving a rhythm that belonged uniquely to the inn at midday. Conversations here were hushed, not out of secrecy but out of the gentle fatigue of travel. Words were often practical, a mention of weather, a question about the road ahead, a note of where a shrine or stream might be found. Pilgrims rarely spoke much of themselves. The road taught a kind of quietness, a focus on the present step, rather than on long stories of the past. Yet, in these brief exchanges, there was still connection. A nod, a smile, the sharing of bread each small act built a sense of fellowship, however temporary. The innkeeper played an unspoken but vital role in this rhythm. Their life was tied to the ebb and flow of travelers, to the steady stream of people passing along the road. They tended the fire, baked the bread, mended the thatch, and welcomed each guest with some simple kindness. For them, the pilgrims were both strangers and familiar figures, different faces, yet always carrying the same staff, the same cloak, the same weary steps. The inn was not only their livelihood but, here offering, a space where the movement of the world paused for a moment. Straw mattresses filled small rooms or loft spaces above the main hall. These beds were coarse, sometimes lumpy, but they offered a place to lie down, to stretch weary limbs, to close eyes without the chill of open air. Cloaks were spread upon the straw for added comfort, and boots rested by the bed. Sleep here was not deep or luxurious, but it carried the pilgrim into a necessary rest, even if only for an hour before the road called again. The architecture of such inns was modest. Low beams crossed ceilings, some so low that a tall man might stoop. Walls leaned slightly with age, their timbers darkened by smoke and years of weather. Doors creaked on hinges, floors groaned beneath foots. Yet none of these things detracted from the sense of safety the building offered. Imperfection was part of its charm, part of its long service to countless travelers who had passed through. The rhythm of the day often revolved around these stops. Morning carried the pilgrim out onto the road, the body still eager and fresh. Midday, hunger and weariness pressed more firmly, and the sight of an inn brought relief. The pause allowed the mind to reset, the body to restore, before the journey continued into the long hours of afternoon. Without such places, the road might have felt endless, but with them, it gained a gentle structure, a heartbeat of effort and rest, effort and rest. In some inns, the walls bore small tokens left by travelers' carved initials, symbols, scratched in wood, or even shells hung as signs of the pilgrim's passage. These marks, though small, gave the building a sense of memory, as though it too were a traveler collecting stories. The inn was not just a shelter but a witness, holding within its beams the echoes of countless voices, countless footsteps, countless prayers whispered by the fire. The sense of community extended beyond the inn itself. Villages nearby often depended on the steady trickle of travelers for trade and news. A farmer might bring milk or eggs, a baker might sell extra loaves, a brewer might provide ale. Pilgrims carried stories from distant places, and though they spoke sparingly, their presence reminded villagers of a larger world beyond their fields. The inn stood at the meeting point between the familiar and the faraway, where the local and the wandering came together in quiet balance. Children summoned to mess watched the travelers from doorways, curious about their cloaks, their staffs, and the shells or badges they carried. For them, the road was both ordinary and mysterious, a line of strangers moving steadily, never fully explained. To see these figures pause at the inn, to watch them eat and rest, was to glimpse a piece of that mystery in everyday form. By afternoon, the pilgrim would rise again, tightening cloak and satchel, taking up staff, and stepping once more onto the road. The warmth of the fire lingered in the body, the taste of bread still faint on the tongue, the memory of straw beneath the back not yet faded. The inn resided dentro the distance, smoke curling gently above its roof, until it became part of the landscape. Once more, the pilgrim carried with them not only the nourishment, but the calm, the sense of pause, that the inn had offered. Their hearth itself remained behind, glowing with embers, awaiting the next traveler. Its fire never truly died, for as one pilgrim departed, another soon arrived. The rhythm was continuous, the exchange unending. This was the gift of the road's small inns, not luxury or grandeur, but constancy. They were always there, quietly, enduring, offering the same simple comforts to whoever passed by. Evening would bring other shelters, larger towns, or monasteries with greater halls. But the small inn, the humble hearth, held a special place in the pilgrim's memory. It was where the journey paused, not in ceremony, but in quiet necessity. It was where the body rested enough to continue, and where the spirit was reminded that kindness and warmth could be found even in these simplest of places. The road stretched on, always demanding more steps, yet it was shaped and softened by these brief shelters, by the rhythm of firelight and straw, by the murmur of spoons in bowls and the crackle of logs. In the quiet history of pilgrimage, the inns and their hearths were not grand monuments, but they were the true companions of the journey. They stood faithfully along the way, offering comfort, shaping the day, and reminding each traveler that no one walked the road entirely alone. The road of pilgrimage, stretching across fields, villages, and valleys, was not a road of chance. It was shaped, guided, and remembered through markers left by many hands over many generations. These were not signboards painted in bright colors, nor printed maps folded in satchels. Instead, guidance appeared in a quieter, older form, stones placed with care along the way. Some were tall and upright, visible from a distance, while others were smaller, half hidden in grass or hedgerows. Yet each one served its purpose. They pointed, reminded, reassured. For those walking the long road, they were steady companions, standing with patience, offering direction without words. Morning light often revealed the first of these markers most clearly. The dew on the grass, thinnest, lifting from the fields, and there at the edge of a crossroads a stone rose, worn and familiar. Perhaps it bore a carved cross, faint now but once sharp under the hand of a mason. Perhaps it showed only grooves, simple lines meant to suggest the direction or distance. Sometimes there were letters, half vanished into the surface, prayers written by someone long gone. The pilgrim would pause, place a hand upon the cool stone, and trace those fading marks. In that act, they joined countless others who had done the same, linking past and present through the simple gesture of touch. These stones were not only guides of direction, but also anchors of faith. Tosi, one after many miles, was to feel reassurance that the road was true, that the steps were leading somewhere unknown. Without them, the land might have felt endless, paths uncertain, but with them, the journey carried shape. Each stone was a voice saying, softly, "You are not lost," even if words could no longer be read. The presence of the stone itself was enough to calm the traveler. Some stones stood near shrines or chapels, their meaning strengthened by the sacred spaces nearby. Pilgrims would stop at these places, not only to check their path, but to rest and pray. The stones became part of ritual. A hand would rest upon them before entering a prayer might be whispered into their surface, as though the stone could hold it and carry it forward. With time, the grooves deepened. Fingers had traced the same lines for centuries, and the stone, found moving, bore the record of all who had sought reassurance there. In villages, markers often stood at the edges of fields, at points where the road curved or divided. Farmers knew them well, their plows and carts passing daily by. For the villager, the stone might fade into the ordinary landscape, but for the pilgrim, it remained a lifeline. It was both a sign and a welcome, a reminder that the road was shared and understood. Children might play near them, climbing their bases, unaware of the history their games rested upon. Dogs might sleep in their shade, chickens peck at the soil around them. Life carried on around the stones, but their presence gave quiet order to the rhythm of travel. Not all markers were carved. Many were plain, rough-hewn rocks, set upright at a bend in the path. Their power lay not in decoration, but in placement. To come upon one unexpectedly, rising from the grass, was to know that others had walked here, that the road was recognized and marked. Even without words, the stone spoke, this way, not that way. Its simplicity was part of its strength. Travelers did not require elaborate design, only the assurance of direction. Over centuries, weather softened their surfaces. Rain streaked them, wind smoothed their edges, moss grew across their bases, yet they remained. In their endurance, the pilgrimage itself, slow, steady, shaped by time but never erased. The pilgrim, walking with staff and satchel, often felt kinship with these stones. Both stood in the same fields, both faced the same sun and rain. Both were small against the wide world, yet steady in purpose. Inscriptions, where they remained, offered glimpses into older lives. A name carved deep might still be read, though the letters blurred with age. Perhaps it was the name of a benefactor who had placed the stone, or of a saint honored there. Sometimes only fragments could be made out, a single letter, part of a prayer. The pilgrim might pause, trying to guess the rest, letting a map fill in what time had taken. In this way, the stone became not just a guide, but a bridge to forgotten voices. Legends often grew around certain markers. Villagers might tell of a stone that had been set by angels, or Roni that moved miraculously in the night to point travelers toward safety. Others were said to mark the graves or follymen, or the spots where miracles occurred. For the pilgrim, weary from miles of walking, such stories gave richness to the journey. Whether true or not, they added a sense of wonder to the plain rock standing silently beside the road. The rhythm of travel was softened by these encounters. Long stretches of path could be tiring, the mind wandering, the body aching, but the sight of a stone ahead lifted the spirit. Each one was like Amelstone, breaking the journey into smaller, bearable parts. Pilgrims often remembered them as part of Tharod's story. The tall stone by the river, the carved one near the oak tree, the leaning stone beside the field of barley. These became markers not only of distance, but of memory. To modern eyes, accustomed to signs and maps, the reliance on such simple guides may seem fragile, yet in their simplicity lay their strength. Stones required no maintenance beyond their own endurance. They did not fade like paint or tear like parchment. They stood through storms, through years of war and peace, through the endless passing of feet. Their language was universal, needing no translation. A carved cross meant the same to every pilgrim, no matter where they came from. A plain stone, upright in the soil, meant the same reassurance. This way continues. Some markers took Thepharim of cairns, small piles of stones added to by each passerby. A pilgrim would place one rock upon the heap, both guided by it and contributing to it. Over time, these cairns grew taller, shaped by countless hands. Each addition was an act of trust, a way of saying, I too have walked here. I to leave this sign for the next traveler. These cairns embodied the communal nature of pilgrimage, the truth that no one walked entirely alone. At times, a pilgrim might kneel beside a stone, pressing forehead or lips against its surface. The act was not only of faith but of gratitude for safe passage thus far, for guidance still ahead. In the silence of fields or the quiet shade of woods, the gesture became a prayer spoken without words. The stone, patient and unchanging, received it, just as it had received countless others. Even when no marker appeared, the memory of them carried strength. Thepilgrim might walk for miles without seeing one, yet the thought that another lay ahead gave endurance. Tharod was never endless so long as the markers continued, and when at last another stone appeared on the horizon, the body felt lighter, the journey more possible. As evening approached, the last markers of the day often brought special comfort. They stood bathed in the golden light of sunset, their surfaces glowing softly. Shadows stretched across fields, birds quieted in hedgerows, and the stone stood steady, catching the last warmth of the sun. To pass one at such an hour was to feel the day draw gently toward rest. The pilgrim might place a hand upon it once more, offering thanks before seeking shelter for the night. In the long history of these roads, the stones remained when travelers did not. Generations passed, footsteps faded, but the markers endured. They were the memory of the path itself, proof that others had walked and would walk again. For the pilgrim, they were never just rocks. They were companions, guides, and witnesses. In their stillness, they gave direction. In their silence, they offered comfort. To walk a pilgrimage road without such markers would be to walk in every turn a question. But with them, the road unfolded like a book with its pages intact, each stone a word, each inscription a line. Together, they told the story of countless journeys, of faith carried step by step, stone by stone. And so, the pilgrim continued, guided not by maps or signboards, but by ancient stones standing patiently along the way. The road stretched onward, and the markers remained, quiet as ever. Their message winged through centuries. You are not lost. Keep walking. The path is true. The summer months brought their own rhythm to the long pilgrimage roads. By then, the fields were thick with crops, and the air carried a fullness, heavy but alive with sound. Insects hummed at the edges of paths, birds rose and fell across hedgerows, and the heat gathered slowly as the sun climbed higher. For pilgrims, these were days of both trial and quiet beauty. The steps became slower under the weight of warmth, yet the road also opened itself in softer ways. Fields, streams, and rivers stretched like patient companions, always near, always steady, giving shape to the journey. When dawn lifted into summer light, the air was already touched with warmth, though still gentle before noon. The fields stood, still in their early silence, the barley and wheat showing faint movement as a breeze drifted across their tops. Dew sparkled briefly before vanishing in the sun. Pilgrims began their walking then, for the hours before midday were precious, when the heat was not yet overwhelming. At that time of year, even the stones beneath their feet seemed warmer, holding the memory of countless bright days. Yet the calm of morning did not erase what lay ahead, for by midday the sun would lean heavily upon their backs. The road shimmered in that heat, long and pale against the darker green of the fields. Dust rose easily with every step, clinging to sandals, settling into folds of fabric. The world seemed to hum with brightness, colors sharper, sounds clearer. A grasshopper leaped suddenly from the roadside, the chirp of sparrows mixed with the rustling of leaves, and from distant orchards came the call of doves. For the pilgrim, the senses filled with these details, not as distractions, but as threads of the day's fabric. Each sound, each glimmer, became part of the memory of relief. Often came near water. Streams cut through the land, sometimes narrow enough to cross with own stride, sometimes wider, requiring wooden bridges or stepping stones. Pilgrims paused here, letting the coolness ease the weight of the sun. They filled flasks or cupped hands to drink, feeling the water slip quick and delive between their fingers. Some removed sandals, sitting upon a flat stone to rest tired feet in the current. The coldness of the water was startling, yet soothing, a reminder that nature offered gifts along the way. A river, always moving, carried the sense of time itself, steady, flowing, unchanged by the passing of any single traveler. Children often played near such places. Villagers who lived by rivers used them not only for drinking but for washing, for watering animals, for cooling grain sacks after harvest. While adults worked, children ran barefoot at the edges, tossing stones or chasing each other across shallows. Their laughter rose above the sound of water, clear and light in the summer air. For a pilgrim, weary and quiet, such laughter was not a burden, but a gentle reminder of life's simpler rhythms. The road carried many solemn intentions, prayers and vows, but it also passed through places where life remained light, even joyful. Groves, too, were treasured. Clusters of trees offered shade where the heat broke and softened. Pilgrims stepped gratefully beneath branches, their eyes adjusting to the dimmer green light. The sound of leaves above, whispering in faint breezes, was like a murmur of rest. Here they sat, eating small meals of bread or dried fruit, sharing a few words with fellow travelers if company was near. Silence often held more than conversation. The act of sitting, of pausing under trees outside the grove, fields shimmered endlessly. Within, there was coolness, a pocket of calm suspended in the day. Fields in summer were themselves a sight of beauty. Wheat stood tall, golden as it ripened. Barley swayed like waves under the wind. Farmers moved slowly through them, bending, lifting, sometimes calling tuxin that pulled carts. The smell of cut hay lingered in the air, sweet and dry, clinging to clothing. Pilgrims passed by these scenes not as strangers entirely, but as witnesses. They did not work the fields, yet they shared in their presence. The sight of growing grain gave comfort, for it meant food, harvest, sustenance. Each furrow of soil, each plant turning toward the sun, was part of the same earth that bore the pilgrims' steps. The rivers, wider-thorn streams, carried even more presence. They moved with a rhythm that seemed eternal, bending through valleys, widening into calm stretches, narrowing into quicker runs. Bridges sometimes arched over them, wooden or stone, built by communities who knew the need for crossing. At such places, pilgrims paused, not on light or drink, but to gaze. Water reflected sky, clouds drifting slowly above, the blue broken by ripples. Insects danced. Upon the surface, fish sometimes broke it with a sudden flick. For those on long journeys, rivers felt like companions, constant, dependable, always flowing alongside, even if unseen for miles. Some rivers carried history within them. Villages told stories of saints who once walked their banks, or miracles said to have occurred in their waters. Pilgrims listened, half believing, half simply glad for the tale to pass the time. Whether or not such stories were true mattered little. What remained was the sense of sacredness. To wash in the river tottering from it was not only physical relief, but a joining with something old, something remembered by generations. Each step onward felt lighter for having touched such waters. The cycle of summer days created a steady rhythm for walking. Morning brought the first hours of lightness, noon pressed down with its heat, afternoon stretched with slower steps, and evening came with relief once more. The rivers and fields did not change suddenly. They remained steady through each stage, yet the pilgrim's perception shifted. In the morning, fields glowed softly. In afternoon they blazed golden, and by evening they sank into shadows, cool and calm again. The river sparkled under noon's brightness, then deepened into quiet silver as the sun lowered. The set changes, subtle yet constant, gave shape to the long day, guiding both body and spirit through its hours. When rest was taken near water, it often carried with it the hum of insects, the steady murmur of flow, and the flicker of sunlight across ripples. Pilgrims learned to notice such details more closely in summer, for heat slowed them, requiring pauses more often. Every pause revealed something: a dragonfly hovering, a reed bending, the smell of wild mint growing along the bank. These were not grand sights, but they were real, and they stitched the day together gently. A journey of many miles was endured, not only by strength, but by noticing these smaller gifts. At times, storms broke the stillness. Summer skies, clear for days, could suddenly gather dark clouds. Wind moved quickly across fields, bending grain, shaking branches. Rivers swelled with sudden rain, their sound louder, stronger. Pilgrims hurried for shelter, finding barns, chapels, or simply crouching beneath trees. Yet even storms were part of the rhythm. Afterward, the air cooled, the fields shone freshly washed, and the earth smelled of damp soil. Pilgrims stepped out again, shoes wet, but spirits lifted, the heat broken for a while. Such storms reminded them that even in hardship, change always came. Villages along rivers often felt alive in summer. Women washed clothes at banks, spreading them on grass to dry. Men worked in boats, carrying goods or fishing. Animals came to drink, cattle lowing, horses snorting, dogs splashing at edges. Life centered on water, for without it the fields could not thrive. Pilgrims, passing by, became part of this cycle briefly. They might sit with villagers, share a meal of bread dipped in broth, listen to stories of harvests and floods. Then they rose again, the river's murmur following them as they walked onward. The companionship of rivers was not only practical, but spiritual. Flowing water reminded pilgrims of the passing of time, the cleansing of burdens, endless movement toward something greater. To watch it was to feel their own journey mirrored. Just as water moved steadily toward the sea, so too did their steps move, toward a distant shrine, a cathedral, a sacristation. Even when weary, even when sweat soaked their clothes and dust clung to their feet, they could look upon the river and remember, this movement is purpose, this flow has meaning. As dusk approached, Summerfields took on a softer tone. The brightness dimmed, shadows lengthened, and the air cooled once more. Rivers reflected the colors of sunset, golds and pinks trembling across their surface. Pilgrims arriving at such a place in evening often lingered, watching light fade. The road still stretched ahead, but for a moment they felt stillness, as though the river and fields together whispered rest. Some might wash once more, cooling face and hands before shelter. Others sat quietly, letting the last warmth of the day ease into their bones. Night gathered slowly, with crickets beginning their song, with fireflies sparking at the edges of fields, with stars showing faintly above. Rivers darkened, their surface now only faintly shining with moonlight. Pilgrims settled in nearby inns, barns, or fields, listening to the night sounds. The memory of the day lingered, heat upon the back, laughter of children by its stream, the cool touch of water, the rustle of barley in the wind. These became not just memories, but threads in the larger tapestry of their journey. Through summer's heat, through fields and rivers, the road carried on. And always, there was the sense of companionship, the earth beneath, the crops around, the water flowing. Pilgrims walked, not alone but in a world alive with gentle constancy. Every field harvested, every river crossed, every child's laughter heard along the way became part of the story. And so the steps continued, steady, slow, touched always by summer's warmth, guided always by the rivers that never ceased their flow. Autumn arrived quietly along the pilgrimage routes, shifting the world from the warmth of summer into a gentle, contemplative coolness. The air carried a crispness that brushed against the skin, soft and invigorating, edged with the smell of fallen leaves and damp soil. Morning mist lingered longer over fields now golden and brown, revealing paths only slowly under the emerging sun. Pilgrims stepped onto roads lined with hedgerows, their feet crunching softly over leaves that had drifted from high branches. Every sound seemed sharper in the thinning air, a crow's call echoing across an empty orchard, the rustle of wind through the trees, or the distant murmur of a stream growing quiet after the summer floods. Autumn slowed the pace of the journey, not harshly, but naturally, as if the land itself suggested reflection, urging travelers to notice the small details that summer's brilliance might have hurried past. Orchards were among the first signs of the season's bounty. Apples, pears, and quince hung heavy on branches, sometimes bending toward the ground with the weight of ripeness. Pilgrims often passed these groves in early morning, their steps lighter, for the smell of fruit on the air, or paused briefly when generous villagers offered a hand-picked apple. The sweetness of such gifts was a small comfort on long roads, sustaining both body and spirit. Children played nearby, sometimes tossing fallen fruit to each other, their laughter carrying softly across the orchard, blending with the rustle of leaves. Pilgrims watched quietly, resting for a moment on a low stone wall or a fallen trunk, tasting the air rich with earth, fruit, and wood smoke. Smoke arose from distant chimneys, spiraling slowly into the crisp sky. Small cottages and inns began to light fires earlier in the day, preparing for the cool hours that would grow longer as autumn progressed. The smell of burning wood mingled with the faint sweetness of harvested fields, a scent that spoke of hearth, comfort, and labor done well. Travelers welcomed these signals, guiding their steps toward places where warmth and rest could be found. Many inns placed near crossroads became temporary havens, offering a simple meal of bread, cheese, and warm broth. Inside, the fire's crackle was companionable, a sound both soothing and grounding, wrapping the pilgrims in a quiet sense of protection from the autumn chill. The fields themselves shifted in color and texture, crops harvested, soil exposed, grasses turning gold and brown. They carried a rhythm of completion and pause. The pilgrim, walking between these stretches, felt the weight of the season settle into the body and mind. Long lines of harvested grain shimmered under sunlight, angled lower in the sky, reflecting its amber glow. Hedgerows were dotted with berries, small red fruits that caught the eye with their vivid color. Occasionally, a farmer passed, cart or plow in hand, nodding quietly to the traveler. The work continued despite the season's coolness, and the pilgrim witnessed it with gentle curiosity, part of the same world that provided both sustenance and direction. Autumn was also the season of wind and rain. Mornings might begin calm and crisp, but by afternoon, a gentle breeze could turn brisk, carrying leaves in spirals across the path. Travelers adjusted their cloaks and shifted packs, feeling the change in air as a reminder of the season's steady march. Rain, when it came, fell in soft sheets rather than summer's sudden downpours, making the earth darken, the roads slick with mud, and the rivers swell slightly. Pilgrims accepted these conditions with patience, stepping carefully, noticing the sheen of water on stones, or the delicate droplets hanging from leaf tips. Even discomfort was softened by observation, the mind focusing on small details to pass the time and calm the body. The stones marking pilgrimage routes took on a different character in autumn, cooler and occasionally damp. They reflected the subtle light of shorter days. Moss grew along their sides, glimmering green in contrast to brown fallen leaves. Pilgrims often touched these stones, tracing grooves carved long ago, finding comfort in the familiarity of their shapes. Each stone seemed to embody endurance, standing steadfast as seasons turned and travelers passed by in countless generations. Even the plain, unmarked stones carried meaning. They were quiet signals, reminders that path was true, that steps were being taken in shared experience with those who had walked before. Paths through woods and groves were particularly resonant during this season. Trees, shedding leaves in gentle cascades, allowed shafts of sunlight to pierce through, illuminating the pilgrim's way in dappled patterns. Branches moved softly in the wind, creating a gentle rhythm to match the traveler's step. The ground was cushioned with fallen leaves, sometimes damp, giving a faintly soft texture beneath tired feet. Pilgrims moved with a slower grace, careful to step on stable ground, but also letting their eyes wander across the subtle color changes, from deep green to orange, from ochre to muted brown. The land felt alive, aware, and patient with the passage of human life. Small streams, often hidden within the folds of valleys, offered refreshment and reflection. The water, cool from recent rains and shaded by trees, ran with a calm, steady flow. Pilgrims posito cup hands or dip a flask, savoring the touch of liquid against sun-warmed skin. Sometimes they rested on stones beside the water, feet dangling lightly above the current. The sound of running water became a companion, a continuous murmuring that underscored the passage of time. Fish moved beneath the surface, insects danced along the edges, and the occasional leaf drifted downstream. It was a living meditation, a way Taslo both pace and thought, bringing calm to body and mind. In villages, autumn brought a shift in activity as well. Markets offered the first of stored grains, root vegetables, and preserved fruits. Farmers repaired tools, tended animals, and prepared barns for winter. Smoke from hearths rose early, signaling meals and warmth. Pilgrims moving through these villages found themselves in a quieter world than summer's bustling days. Conversations were subdued, more practical than social, yet the warmth of human presence remained. Inns filled slow with travelers seeking evening rest. Children ran briefly through alleyways, often carrying small bundles of gathered fruits, their excitement tempered by the cooler air. Every detail contributed to the seasonal rhythm, connecting traveler and village in mutual awareness of autumn pace. Harvest colors dominated the landscape. Fields turned golden, amber, and brown. Hedgerows dotted with red and purple berries. Orchards heavy with ripe fruit. Pilgrims walked amidst these colors, noting the way light shifted across them as clouds passed overhead. Shadows lengthened in the afternoon, bringing a calm end to the day's brightness. The road itself felt softer, cushioned by leaves or straw swept from nearby farms. Pilgrims often adjusted their pace accordingly, letting thackle air steady their breathing, letting the colors fill their senses. The land seemed to invite introspection, to offer quiet observation as a companion to physical movement. Weather patterns of autumn added subtle challenges. Winds could grow brisk, rustling leaves into spirals across the path. Occasional mist rolled through lowlands, veiling the distance in a delicate gray. Rain softened the earth and darkened the stones, but also sharpened color. Sand smelled of fertile soil. Pilgrims met these shifts without rush. Every step became deliberate, measured, in tune with the road. The changes in air and light enhanced awareness, making every pause, every gaze, every breath more meaningful. The world felt alive and attentive, responding in small ways to those moving through it. The act of walking itself became more reflective in autumn. Pilgrims noticed small details: the texture of a stone beneath the heel, the gentle slope of a hill, the scent of burning wood carried from a distant cottage. Each milieu was slower but richer in observation. The rhythm of feet on earth mirrored the rhythm of falling leaves, steady, inevitable, peaceful. Travel was not a hurry toward a destination, but a process of awareness, of participating fully in the ongoing changes of land, sky, and season. Evening brought additional transformation. As the sun lowered, the land took on muted hues, shadows deepened, and the wind softened. Fires burned longer in hearths. The smell of cooking drifted across paths. Pilgrims prepared for the night with small rituals, arranging packs, wrapping cloaks, checking flasks, setting down staff and satchel. The final hours of daylight offered a natural pause, a gentle end to walking, a moment to reflect on miles covered and the gifts of the day. The air cooled, and with it came a sense of quiet closure, a slow release from effort into rest. Pilgrims resting for the night often found inns, barns, or small cottages that welcomed them with warmth. Straw was laid on floors, fires crackled steadily in hearths, and simple meals replenished strength. Conversations were minimal, more about the road or the day's weather than personal matters. Yet, within the quiet, companionship remained shared in gestures, in smiles, in the knowledge that many had traveled this same path before and many would follow. Sleep arrived easily in such spaces, carried on the gentle rhythms of autumn air, the scent of leaves, smoke, and harvested fields. Throughout the season, the stones marking the pilgrimage routes maintained their constancy. Cooler now, touched by morning frost at times, damp with rain or dew, they reminded travelers of endurance and steadfastness. Their grooves, often worn by countless hands, carried prayers, names, and faith through time. Pilgrims pressed hands to these stones, seeking comfort and connection. Even unmarked stones offer addresserance, standing quietly to indicate direction and presence. In autumn, their calm solidity felt a special appointment, echoing the reflective mood of the season. Walking through autumn, pilgrims carried with memories of summer's warmth, the colors of the harvest, the coolness of streams, and the quiet companionship stones and rivers. Every field, every orchard, every riverbank contributed to a slow unfolding of days and footsteps, rhythmically measured, traced paths across earth, softened by leaves. The journey became less about distance and more about presence within the landscape, within the movement of seasons, and the quiet of personal reflection. Winter arrived on the pilgrimage roads with a quiet hush, soft but absolute, as though the world had pressed pause and exhaled in relief. The air carried a sharp clarity, cold enough to make breath rise in pale, ghost-like clouds with every step. Fields lay bare, their last crops harvested and soil hardened by frost. Trees, stripped of leaves, stood like sentinels along the roads, their branches etched against pale skies, still and patient. Pilgrims wrapped themselves in thick cloaks, drawing them close around their shoulders, tightening cords and belts to hold warmth near their bodies. Every movement required careful attention. The hard ground was firm beneath their feet, yet icy in places, and small stones became slick obstacles in an otherwise familiar path. The road itself, though unchanged in form, appeared transformed by winter, simpler, quieter, more deliberate in tone, demanding both patience and awareness from those who walked it. Villages along the route reflected the seasoning, their muted rhythm. Chimneys released thin threads of smoke, curling upward into the pale winter sky. Doors closed early against the chill, and windows glimmered faintly with candlelight, offering glimpses of warmth inside. Livestock huddled in barns or near thick hay, their soft sounds muffled by the quiet snow and frost outside. Footsteps crunched on frozen soil or hardened leaves, the sound sharp in otherwise still surroundings. Pilgrims arriving in such villages often found them hushed, with only the minimal bustle necessary for survival. A fire stoked in a hearth, water carried from a well, bread baked and set to cool. The contrast between the warmth indoors and the cold, open road outside was stark, yet it offered comfort. Araminda, that even in winter, care and life persisted. The pilgrimage stones remained steadfast along the roads, though they bore winter's mark. Snow dusted their tops, or frost gathered in delicate lace along their edges. Some stones were half buried under ice or crusted mud, yet they continued to serve as guides, silent and in. Pilgrims pressed hands against them to check the path, feeling the cold seep slowly into their gloves, through layers of wool and leather. Even the plainest stone offered assurance. It stood here as it had for years, pointing the way, holding the memory of countless travelers before. The act of touching these stones, sensing their enduring solidity, became a ritual of patience, a quiet acknowledgement that the journey was measured in slow steps, not hurried strides. Alongside roads, the natural world showed winter's restraint. Streams narrowed and slowed where they could, edges frozen, water dark beneath the thin crust. Rivers reflected the grey sky, their currents subdued under ice or shadow. Trees lined these waterways like statues, roots exposed and bark etched with frost. Birds, fewer now than in summer, flitted among hedgerows and roofs, their call sharp in the crisp air. Small animals moved cautiously, leaving tracks in the thin snow. Every aspect of the landscape seemed to participate in a measured pace, shaping the pilgrim's perception of time and distance. Thejani, in such conditions, became contemplative, less about mileage, more about awareness of the quiet, enduring presence of nature and stone. Pilgrims themselves adjusted their routines to winter's cadence. Steps were smaller, more deliberate. Hands were tucked into sleeves or gloves, hats drawn low to retain warmth, scarves wrapped to shield face and neck. Breath came visible and steady, marking each inhalation and exhalation. They paused more often, not for exhaustion alone, but for observation, noting the glint of frost on a leaf, the sharp outline of a distant hill, the muted reflections in a shallow river. Meals were small, often taken while resting against a wall or on a low stone, bread and cheese eaten slowly, water sipped carefully to avoid that. The act of walking became meditative, each motion slow, purposeful, and fully aware of body and surroundings. Fires along the roads offered crucial warmth. Pilgrims often gathered around embers, whether in small village squares, inns, or isolated cottages. Fingers were held close to flames, gloves removed briefly to feel heat, a shared moment with companions encountered along the path. Conversations were soft, muted against winter wind, often about routes, weather, or minor occurrences of the day. Laughter was rare, quieter than in other seasons, yet no less human. Shared warmth became an unspoken act of care, reinforcing the sense of community, even among travelers who would part ways in the morning. Winter roads revealed aspects of the landscape that were less visible in other seasons. Bare branches created intricate silhouettes against pale skies, shadows of stone and tree stretching long as the low sun moved across the horizon. Frost crystallized on hedgerows and fences, sparkling faintly in brief sunlight. Even the simplest textures, the rough bark of a tree, the weathered face of a stone marker, the compacted earth of the path appeared more pronounced, commanding attention. Pilgrims' senses were sharpened by the season, attuned to the subtle changes in light, color, and sound. Every step carried awareness, as if the world itself encouraged reflection in tandem with movement. Stone markers, in particular, took on a deeper resonance in winter. Cold and sometimes covered by frost or snow, they seemed more enduring than ever. Pilgrims often traced their surfaces with gloved or bare hands, reading inscriptions if visible, or simply feeling the shape beneath fingers. Some stones bore crosses, faint carvings, or inscriptions now softened by weather, yet still discernible. These markings linked travelers to the generations that had come before, bridging past and present. Even unmarked stones served as landmarks, their isolati offering a quiet, dependable presence on roads otherwise transformed by frost and snow. The pace of walking slowed naturally with winter's conditions. Frosty mornings made the ground firm yet somatic. Afternoons carried the low, angled sunlight that lengthened shadows and emphasized contours in the earth. Pilgrims adjusted their steps, attentive to each stone and contour of the road. The mind, moving in step with the body, became contemplative. Thoughts turned inward as much as forward, reflections on past journeys, prayers for safety, or simple observations of the frost on a leaf. The season shaped both physical and emotional rhythm, creating a steady, deliberate journey. In the wider landscape, the contrast between heat and cold was emphasized by village life. Hearths smoked gently in cottages, animals sheltered in barns, their breaths steaming in the chill. Small gardens, protected with straw and brush, held the last of hardy vegetables. Pilgrims passing through noted these signs of careful attention, the quiet persistence of life despite the cold. They often paused to watch simple tasks, a villager carrying wood, a child stacking straw, a farmer adjusting a roof to shed snow. Every action seemed small but purposeful, reinforcing the notion that endurance was achieved step by step, as the road itself demanded. Rivers and streams were slower in winter, their currents muted under thin ice, their reflective surface broken occasionally by stones or fallen branches. Pilgrims rested near these waters, noting how they mirrored the pale sky or reflected faint shapes of trees. The sound of flowing water, though quieter than in spring or summer, provided a rhythmic backdrop to steps, offering both guidance and reassurance. In some places, bridges coated with frost required caution, yet crossing them became an exercise in patience and mindfulness. Each safe step brought a quiet satisfaction, reinforcing the lesson of measured progress. Fires, in inns or along the roadside, became central markers of daily rhythm. Evening approached earlier in winter, and travelers often arrived at lodging as shadows lengthened. Fires crackled in stone hearths, bread and broth warmed bodies and spirits, and cloaks were draped close. To retain heat, silence often fell over such spaces, punctuated only by the steady crackle of flames or the occasional murmur of conversation. For pilgrims, this calm became a companion, a counterbalance to the cold and the long hours of walking. Sleep came easily in these warm havens, carrying the quiet of the winter landscape into dreams. The physical act of walking itself in winter required mindfulness. Cold stiffened muscles, frost-hardened ground, and boots, sometimes damp, demanded careful movement. Pilgrims adopted a measured stride, mindful of each stone and root. Every step became intentional, echoing the deliberate pace of the season itself. The path stretched ahead, straight or winding, yet movement was never hurried. Patience guided the journey more than urgency, a reflection of Thesison's tempering influence on body and spirit. Pilgrims also encountered occasional snow, a light, distinct transferred fields into soft white expanses, muffling sound, creating a sense of stillness. Footprints were left behind in crisp outlines, ephemeral reminders of progress, soon partially erased by wind or fresh snow. Pilgrims surveyed these effects with quiet attention, noting the way the world seemed suspended, each step both delicate, meaningful. The road, while familiar, appeared renewed under this coating, and travelers were reminded of the impermanence and continuity of movement. Footprints faded, but stones remained, marking the way. Even in the coldest weather, the roads connected pilgrims to the larger landscape: frosted hills, leafless groves, river-sand streams. Villages asleep under early duskfall contributed to a sense of belonging to something enduring. Each stone, each step, each breath of icy air reinforced the continuity of the pilgrimage. Travelers moved not only through space but through time, walking alongside countless predecessors who had endured the summer conditions, relied on the same markers, rested by the same rivers, and sought warmth from the same hearths. By nightfall, the journey often rested. Pilgrims found shelter where possible, wrapped in layers of wool, blankets, or straw. Fires glowed steadily, casting flickering warmth across wooden beams or stone walls. Meals were simple, nourishment taken slowly to restore energy, and water or broth sipped deliberately. The quiet of winter allowed thoughts to drift, memories of steps taken, stones passed, rivers crossed, and distant destinations approached. Sleep came with the knowledge of endurance, of steady movement through cold and quiet, guided by patience. Asmak as strength. Through winter, every step along the pilgrimage road became a meditation. Frost, wind, ice, and snow imposed a gentle discipline, slowing motion, heightening observation, and deepening awareness of Bath, the land and the journey. Within, stones, rivers, and villages stood as companions. Their ushering life continued in muted rhythms, reminding travelers that hardship, though present, need not be harsh or jarring. Each day ended with rest. Each step counted toward progress. Each marker along the way a witness to patience, persistence, and quiet endurance. Spring arrived gently on the pilgrimage roads, bringing with it a quiet sense of renewal that transformed both landscape and traveler. After the long grip of winter, the earth softened under the sun's warming rays. Frost that had stiffened, the soil melted gradually, allowing blades of grass and tender wildflowers to emerge, poking delicately through the earth. Each step taken by pilgrims now pressed into a pliant surface, occasionally dotted with puddles left by thawing snow or early spring rains. The sound of water running over small stones in stream sand, rivulets filled the air with a gentle murmur, echoing softly across valleys and fields. The world seemed to breathe again, as if awakening from a long, quiet sleep. And pilgrims walking along these paths were invited to share in that calm, careful rhythm. Birdsong returned with the season, bright and persistent. Hedges, previously bare and silent, now hosted small flocks chirping and calling to one another. Sparrows, finches, and blackbirds flitted from branch to branch, occasionally alighting on fence posts or the low roofs of cottages. Their music created a soft tapestry of sound that accompanied the pilgrims' footsteps, turning even the quietest stretches athwart into lively, natural corridors. Travelers sometimes paused to listen, inhaling the fresh air scented faintly with wet soil and the earliest blossoms. Each note seemed to mark progress, celebrating the gentle unfolding of life along the path, a reminder that the world was moving forward, even when the journey felt slow. Villargasol on the roads reflected the season's renewal as well. Markets, which had lain subdued during winter, grew lively once more. Stalls displayed fresh bread, baked early in morning ovens, still warm and fragrant. Herbs, washed and bundled, added a green freshness to tables, while linen and wool goods were spread carefully for villagers moved with renewed energy, sweeping thresholds, tending gardens, and repairing fences or roofs after winter's toll. Pilgrims passing through these places observed quietly, sometimes purchasing small provisions for the day, or merely inhaling the combined smells of baking, fresh grass, and water from recent Lyafilled wells. Each village offered both practical sustenance and a reminder that the journey was part of a living, breathing world, one that participated in cycles beyond the individual traveler's steps. The stones marking the pilgrimage route seemed to respond to spring as well. Covered in frost or muted by winter, they now appeared lively, sometimes fringed with moss, glowing bright green, sometimes surrounded by small flowers that had taken root at their base. Pilgrims touched them lightly, feeling the smooth or rough surfaces, the faint warmth of sin on winter-cooled rock. These stones had endured cold, frost, snow, and ice, and now stood in a landscape and into life. Their constancy offered a quiet reassurance, a reminder that even as the surrounding world renewed itself, the markers of the path remained steadfast. Each stone was both guide and companion, silent yet eloquent in its encouragement to continue. The roads themselves carried the season's changes. Dirt tracks softened with early rains, dust from the summer dry vanished, replaced with the faint smell of wet earth and sprouting grass. Occasionally, puddles mirrored the sky, reflecting clouds. Moving lazily above, the pilgrim steps created small ripples in these reflections, echoing the transient nature of each moment, while the stones and hedgerows remained constant. Paths through groves or alongside hedgerows felt particularly alive, as tender shoots, small flowers, and new leaves marked the renewal of life. Travelers moved with lighter feet, pausing to note tiny details, the way a bud opened on a branch, the delicate pattern of frost still clinging in shaded spots, the occasional insect awakening from winter's slumber. Streams and rivers carried their own gentle energy in spring. Water, swollen by melted frost and early rains, flowed steadily along familiar courses, sometimes rushing over small stones, sometimes widening into pools that reflected the sky. Pilgrims paused to drink or refill flasks, occasionally removing boots to wash tired feet in the cool, clear water. The act of touching the river, letting the liquid run over skin, was restorative, reminding travelers that the earth itself provided for those who moved patiently. Birds often gathered at edges, dipping in and out, while occasional fish disturbed the surface with subtle movements. Pilgrims walked onward with the sound of water accompanying them, rhythmic and soothing, a natural meditation alongside physical movement. Fields along the roads offered a quiet celebration of spring. Freshly plowed soil, dark and fertile, spread across gentle slopes, ready to receive seed. Crops planted in previous seasons began to show shoots, tentative yet persistent, reaching toward the sun. Wildflowers dotted unplowed spaces, providing color and scent that drifted across paths. Pilgrims passing these areas often slowed their pace, absorbing the soft beauty and taking in the vitality of the season. The act of observing became intertwined with walking. Step, look, breathe, repeat. Even brief pauses provided sustenance for the spirit, connecting the traveler with a rhythm that stretched far beyond the distance of a single day. Villagers engaged in seasonal labors offered small lessons in attentiveness. Women tended to gardens, planting or nurturing early gathering herbs, or washing cloths in streams. Men repaired fences, tended livestock, or prepared the fields for sowing. Children ran lightly among adults, learning both tasks and observation. Pilgrims often watched quietly, occasionally helping if appropriate, or merely noting the calm, steady work that persisted. Each action seemed aligned with the season, each movement deliberate, yet unhurried, demonstrating the quiet poetry of life, continuing in harmony with the land. The scent of spring became a constant companion for travelers. Blossoms on herbs in village gardens, the faint smell of wet earth and new grass, and the occasional smoke from an early cooking fire combined into a subtle, layered perfume. Pilgrims inhaled deeply as they walked, letting the mixture of scents create a sense of presence, of being truly within the landscape rather than merely moving through it. Each step reinforced connection to the world around them. The freshness of air carrying not only relief from winter's chill, but also a reminder of resilience and continuity. Sunlight, in spring, took on a gentle, warming quality. Early in the morning, soft rays filtered through hedgerows and groves, glinting off dew still lingering on leaves and grass. Shadows were long and delicate, moving slowly across paths and stones. As the sun rose, midday brought brighter illumination. yet the heat was mild, allowing for steady walking without the fatigue of summer. Pilgrims learned to adjust to this rhythm, walking in harmony with light and shadow, noticing the gentle shifting of sun across the landscape. Evenings softened the day, with low light glinting off river surfaces and casting long shadows over fields, signaling time for rest and reflection. The stones themselves offered visual cues in spring, subtly different from other seasons. Moisture often darkened their surfaces, contrasting with moss or small flowers growing nearby. Pilgrims noted texture and shape, sometimes pressing a hand against the cool surface, tracing carvings worn by time. Inscriptions, though often softened by weather, seemed renewed in context, the letters catching the light differently than in winter or summer. These stones, ever present, yet quietly changing with the seasons, became reminders of continuity. The path existed long before each traveler and would continue long after, linking generations through steady, patient presence. Streams, often the lifeblood of the route, carried more water in spring than in late winter. Snowmelt and early rains increased their flow, widening channels, but the movement remained gentle in many areas. Pilgrims followed them, sometimes walking beside rivers, observing wildlife withering to water's edge. Ducks and small birds gathered near pools. Insects emerged gradually, and the sound of moving water became a constant rhythm alongside footsteps. Pausing near these streams became a restorative act, washing hands or face, drinking, or simply watching the gentle motion. Each stop reinforced a sense of connection to the earth, a sense that the journey was part of a living, responsive world. The atmosphere of spring encouraged reflection. Pilgrims often thought of the winter behind them. The roads traveled slowly through cold, frost, and quiet. Comparisons were inevitable. The starkness of winter made the vibrancy of spring more each green shoot a symbol of endurance, each blossom a small reward for patient travel. Travelers became aware of change, not as something dramatic, but as a gentle unfolding, a reminder that time moved steadily, and that each step, each mile, mattered. The road offered a framework for observing the cycles of life, of weather, of growth, and of the continuity that connected past and present journeys. Evening in spring invited a slower rhythm. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows over fields and stones, and the air cooled gently. Fires began to burn in inns and cottages along the route, providing warmth and the smell of bread or broth. Pilgrims settled near these fires, resting their shoulders, adjusting packs, and letting quiet conversation rise softly in the glow of hearthlight. Sleep, when it came, carried the day's impressions. Rivers and fields, stones and groves, birdsong, and distant laughter. Each detail, each sensory observation, became part of memory, a storehouse of quiet beauty and gentle endurance. The cycle of spring along the pilgrimage route, from morning dew to evening glow, shaped a particular rhythm of travel. Steps were lighter than in winter, yet deliberate. Breath easier, yet attentive. Senses awake to subtle change. The landscape, renewed after cold months, invited awareness and participation. Stones, rivers, fields, and hedgerows all contributed to a slow, contemplative movement forward. Pilgrims learned not only to walk, but to see, to hear, to smell, and to feel each moment along the path. Every mile became both practice and reflection, marking the interplay of physical effort and quiet observation. Pilgrims often remarked, though quietly, on the difference in their steps and spirits. Winter had demanded endurance, spring encouraged attentiveness. Frost had slowed motion, warmth and light encouraged ease. Snow had been muted, blossoms now brought color and scent. The road seemed lighter, though unchanged in form, carrying each traveler through a landscape enlivened by renewal. Every stone, every river, every hedge became a marker, not only of distance, but of time, of season, and of personal reflection. Travelers felt themselves part of a wider tapestry of movement, life, and observation. In spring, the pilgrimage road became a bridge between seasons, connecting winter's endurance to summer's activity. Travelers experienced the slow awakening of nature, the turn of light and warmth, and the quiet growth of both crops and human life. Villagers were busy again, with planting, baking, and preparation, yet movement remained unhurried. Streams and rivers reflected the brightening skies, offering both guidance and companionship. Stones, ever present, seemed to rejoice quietly in the renewal around them. welcoming hands and feet with familiarity and comfort. Pilgrims continued, step by step, breathing the scented air, observing the details of fields, groves, and villages, feeling the seasons shape their own rhythm of walking and reflection. Along the pilgrimage roads, the sound of church bells became a familiar, gentle companion. These bells, hung high in steeples or towers, carried their tones across fields, meadows, and hills. Reaching the ears of travelers bare, they could see the churches themselves. The first peal of morning bells often stirred villagers and pilgrims like a soft invitation to awaken and take part in the day's measured rhythm. Pilgrims walking quietly along Duslic roads heard the notes folding into the mist, drifting over hedgerows and between trees, marking the passage of time with a calm regularity. The sound seemed to linger in the air, wrapping itself around Thetravella's steps, each peal resonating in harmony with the movement of the body along stone paths. Bells bear more than signals. They were companions, anchoring both spirit and sense of place in a shared human experience, stretching across villages, towns, and distant hills. Morning bells carried a particular clarity. Travelers paused, listening, as tones bounced gently off trees, caught on distant rooftops, and faded into the open air. The cadence of the ringing seemed to encourage a slower, more deliberate stride. Pilgrims adjusted their pace consciously, footsteps falling in rhythm with the bell's vibration, a quiet synchronization of sound and motion. Even those alone on empty roads felt a sense of company, the bell connecting them not only with their fellow travelers, but with villagers starting daily chores, opening markets, or tending livestock. The tolling provided a comforting continuity, echoing across fields, already softened by the scent of morning dew, warming earth, and the faint aroma of baking bread from distant inns. Villages along the way were intimately tied to the bell's message. Small churches, sometimes stone-built, sometimes timber-framed, served as the heart of settlement life. Smoke rose early from chimneys as villagers lit fires for warmth and morning meals, their movements accompanied by the bell's call. Markets began to stir, traders arranging bread, cheese, herbs, and wool, their actions punctuated by the rhythmic sound. Pilgrims entering villages heard the bells as part of a layered experience, the scent of fresh bread, the muted clatter of wooden carts, and the soft murmur of conversations all blending into the backdrop of the tolling. Bells became markers not only of faith but of daily existence, reminding travelers of the interwoven rhythms of life in these small communities. Midday bells offered an kind of guidance. When the sun had climbed high enough to warm the air and illuminate the road, churches will ring to call for prayers, signaling a pause in activity. Pilgrims used this as a natural break, sitting on low walls, leaning against stones, or resting under hedgerows. Food, often bread, cheese, or fruits carried from insular villages, was taken slowly, with attention to taste and texture. The steady sound of bells in the distance became a meditative accompaniment to simple acts of sustenance. Travelers could rest and observe the world around them, the ripple of a stream, the rustle of leaves, the shimmer of sunlight on wet stone. The music of the bells carried a sense of shared continuity, echoing over land and life. The afternoon tolling carried a reflective, calming quality. Shadows lengthened across fields, and the light softened as the day moved onward. Pilgrims found themselves walking with a slower rhythm, their gaze drawn to the subtle colors of hedgerows, the patterns of stone and moss along the road, and the gentle motion of rivers and streams. Bells floated across the landscape, connecting places miles apart, creating a shared auditory map. Travelers, often weary from hours of walking, felt the sound as reassurance, a reminder that the road was still marked, the journey still guided, and that many others had traversed these same paths, listening to the same tones in centuries past. Stones, the quiet companions of the pilgrim, seemed to echo the rhythm of bells. Pilgrims touched carved markers, worn smooth by countless hands, sometimes pausing to feel the grooves and shapes. The resonance of the bells in the air, and the solidity of the stones underfoot created a kind of natural dialogue, a language that guided both body and spirit. Steps fell in sync with the sound. Fingers traced carvings in a quiet ritual. Eyes lifted to note the horizon or a distant steeple where the next toll would ring. The world felt connected, each stone, bell, and tree participating in an unspoken coordination that helped travelers feel both grounded and accompanied. The gentle presence of bells also marked transitions of the day. Morning gave way to midday, midday to late afternoon, and late afternoon to early evening, each toll providing subtle orientation without urgency. Pilgrims adjusted their pace, resting when appropriate, walking with more deliberate care when terrain required attention. Even when the road was empty and the sky overcast, the sound of bells carried across valleys or hills, reassuring that direction and purpose persisted. Pilgrims often imagined the countless others who had followed the same path, their ears attuned to these same harmonies, finding similar comfort and rhythm along the same stones. Villages remained connected through their bells. Small chapels, isolated churches, and clustered towns each contributed to the chorus of tolls that traveled across landscape. Travelers often timed their walking or pauses to coincide with the next ringing, measuring distance in sound as much as in footsteps. Bells created a kind of invisible map, linking stone markers, streams, bridges, and crossroads. Even on quiet, solitary paths, pilgrims felt a sense of the wider world, a reassurance that their journey was acknowledged and supported by both land and community. Bells also served as reminders of spiritual intention. Pilgrims often coupled the sound with quiet prayers, whispered or internalized, acknowledging both the journey and the sacred purpose behind it. Even for those walking with purely secular intent, the steady toll created a rhythm that mirrored meditation or breath. Steps fell in measured cadence, thoughts moved in quiet sequence, and the world's smallest details, birdsong, wind through hedgerows, sunlight on moss-covered stones, were observed with gentle attention. The bell and stone together formed a partnership of guidance, reinforcing both physical direction and emotional steadiness. The afternoon often included multiple rings of the bells, signaling prayers, meals, or shifts in village labor. Pilgrims, now settled into the rhythm of the road, found these markers increasingly comforting. Step after step, mile after mile, the sound remained consistent, shaping not only movement but perception. Shadows lengthened over fields and groves, the light soft and dappled as clouds passed overhead. Pilgrims noticed the way the bell shifted depending on landscape, sharp and clear across open fields, mellow and warm in valleys, bright and resonant in towns. Each variation added texture to the auditory experience, deepening the sense of connection with place. Stones near churches were often more intricately carved than those along open roads. Pilgrims pressed fingers to these markers, feeling grooves and patterns worn by generations. Many stones bore crosses, small inscriptions, or subtle symbolic motifs. The tactile experience complemented the auditory guidance of the bells, creating a multisensory support system for travelers. Pilgrims could touch the stone, feel its firmness, hear the resonance of bells, and know simultaneously that their path was both practical and spiritual, rooted in shared history and communal memory. Evening bells held a unique quality, signaling the day's close. Travelers felt instinctively a slowing of pace, an easing of motion, as the sun descended. Long shadows stretched over stones and fields, and cool air settled into valleys and along the roads. Pilgrims found inns, cottages, or wayside shelters, guided in part by the faint tolling from nearby churches. The sound drew them inward, warmth and rest, creating a natural rhythm for preparation and reflection. Fires glowed in hearths, the smell of bread and roasting meat mingled with smoke and earth, and travelers rested their bodies, while the bells continued their distant song. The interaction between bell and step became meditative. Pilgrims walking through open fields felt each toll resonate along the spine, subtly influencing stride and breathing. In wooded areas, tones filtered through trees, softened and muted, inviting inward attention. The stones underfoot remained constant, each step connecting with tactile memory, while the auditory cues offered temporal and emotional orientation. Even the occasional pause, whether to rest, drink, or observe wildlife, was framed by the ongoing omnipresent rhythm of ringing bells. Pilgrims' minds often wandered as they listened, contemplating the countless journeys before their own. Bells had marked departures, arrivals, and transitions for centuries. Each sound carried layers of human experience, prayers, farewells, greetings, and daily routines. Travelers found calm in recognizing this continuity, feeling part of a line of footsteps stretching across time. Stones, similarly, stood as enduring witnesses, silent yet eloquent. The combination of stone and bell created a journey framed by rhythm and constancy, making even solitary travel feel accompanied and purposeful. Through villages and open fields, along rivers and through groves, the sound of bells created a living map. Pilgrims adjusted stride and breathing, paused to rest or observe, and pressed hands to stones with renewed attention. Each toll served as a marker, guiding direction, pace, and focus. Even as light faded, shadows lengthened, and evening brought chill. The distant bells sustained a sense of continuity and calm. Travelers knew that distance, time, and effort were accounted for by the predictable, enduring resonance of each peal. Nightfall deepened the experience. Stars began to appear in the sky, faint yet steady, while the last light glimmered over fields and stones. Bells, now less frequent, carried further across the quiet landscape, offering guidance and reassurance. Pilgrims settled in inns, barns, or cottages, resting alongside fires, food, and fellow travelers. Sleep arrived naturally, accompanied by memory of footsteps, rivers, hedgerows, stones, and bells. The auditory rhythm of Thede, interwoven with tactile experience of the road, left a sense of completion, of calm, and of gentle connection across both space and time. Even when the pilgrim continued alone, perhaps early the next morning, the echo of bells from previous day or distant villages remained in mind. Stones underfoot, birdsong in hedgerows, streams murmuring beside the pathol were imbued with memory of the rhythmic guidance. The journey became more than travel. It became a meditation, a coordination of sound, touch, observation, and thought. Step and toll, stone and breath, movement and sound, each aspect created a seamless experience of continuity and calm, a rhythm that carried pilgrims forward with patience and assurance. Along the pilgrimage routes, the simple act of eating became a gentle rhythm that marked the passage of the day. Food, though humble, carried significance beyond its physical sustenance. A loaf of coarse bread, a wedge of firm cheese, a handful of dried fruit, or a modest bowl of lentil stew provided warmth and energy for travelers' long strides along sunlit paths or fog-laden roads. Pilgrims learned to pause, to notice the textures of bread, the slight tempts of cheese, or the sweetness of dried fruit, turning the act of consumption into a small, mindful ritual. Meals were not hurried, for haste would diminish both nourishment and calm. Rather, each morsel was considered, each sip of water or thin ale an accompaniment to reflection on the road already traveled and the distance yet to come. Early mornings often began with a brief, simple meal. Travelers might sit beside a low wall, beneath a tree, or on a moss-covered patch of grass, unfolding the modest contents of a satchel. The bread, sometimes still warm from a village oven, was broken slowly, sharing its aroma with the cool morning air. Cheese was sliced with care, its texture appreciated with each bite. Pilgrims sipped water from flasks or waterskins, feeling the cool liquid flow, a gentle counterpoint to the firm chew of bread. In these moments, the world was quiet except for the faint rustle of leaves, the distant clatter of livestock, or the call of birds greeting the dawn. Each morning meal became an initiation of the day, a mindful preparation for walking along thorstones through fields and past hedges. By midday, the road often demanded a longer pause. Travelers sought shade beneath trees, leaning against walls or sitting upon flat stones beside the path. Lunch was modest, perhaps bread spread with a thin layer of butter or cheese, or a small portion of dried fruits and nuts. Sometimes the traveler's satchel held a small container of stew, warmed slightly over a fire or left cool by the morning sun. These meals were simple, but the repetition of preparation, unpacking, and consumption provided rhythm and structure to the journey. Pilgrims came to recognize the importance of taking this time slowly, allowing both body and mind to rest and rejuvenate before continuing along the road. Inns and cottages along the route offered warmth and sustenance in a more communal setting. These establishments were modest, often with timber beams, stone floors, and low tables where travelers gathered. Fires crackled in hearths, filling the air with the scent of baking bread and simmering stews. Pilgrims entered quietly, shedding dust from the road, and found small bowls or plates ready to receive simple food. Lentil or vegetable stews were served, with coarse bread, while cheese, salted fish, or preserved meats might be laid beside the dish. Meals were eaten slowly, with attention to taste and texture, and often with an awareness of other travelers sharing the space. Even brief glances or nods to fellow pilgrims conveyed acknowledgement of shared endeavor and journey. The act of sharing food created bonds, however quiet. Pilgrims occasionally offered a slice of bread, a nut, or a sip from a water skin to those walking alongside them, strangers yet companions in effort and endurance. These gestures, though small, reinforced a sense of connection, a subtle reminder that sustenance was also an exchange of kindness. Travelers learned to value not only the physical nourishment of meals, but also the social and emotional nourishment of generosity. Such simple sharing became a rhythm of its own, punctuating the journey with moments of human warmth amidst the solitude of the road. Even the location of meals held intentionality. A traveler might sit on a low wall overlooking a stream, beneath the shade of a spreading tree, or beside a hedgerow sprinkled with wildflowers. The ground was often soft, moss-covered, or carpeted with fallen leaves, offering comfort while eating. The sound of running water, the breeze through leaves, and the distant hum of foliage activity provided a natural backdrop. Meals became part of a broader sensory experience. Taste, sight, smell, and touch merged with quiet observation, allowing the pilgrim to engage fully with both sustenance and season shaped the experience of meals. In spring, fresh greens or tender shoots could be gathered idly on the road or purchased at market stalls, adding subtle variety to bread and cheese. Summer offered fruits, berries, or light preserves, enjoyed in the warmth of long days. Autumn brought the earthy flavors of root vegetables, dried fruit, and preserved meats, while winter required reliance on dried, salted, or baked provisions, often warmed over a hearth. Pilgrims adapted to these seasonal offerings, learning to appreciate subtle flavors and textures, and to recognize the rhythm of nature through the availability of food. The preparation and handling of meals required attention. Pilgrims unwrapped bread carefully, sliced cheese with deliberate motion, and arranged small portions of dried fruits or nuts. Even the simple task of drinking water became ritualized, checking clarity, lifting the flask gently, sipping, and returning it to its resting place. These small mindful gestures created rhythm and focus, grounding the traveler in the present. Meals were thus not only a source of energy, but an opportunity for meditation and encouragement to observe both the road and oneself. Inns, also, offered subtle comforts beyond food. Travelers could rest tired limbs beside fires, observe the flicker of flames on walls and beams, and hear the gentle murmur of conversation or distant footsteps. The scent of smoke, baking bread, and simmering stews provided warmth and calm, creating a safe space to restore energy. Pilgrims often lingered long enough to savor the smell, warmth, and quiet, prolonging the pause as a necessary and restorative art of the journey. The communal nature of the meal, though understated, provided reassurance and a sense of continuity, connecting travelers across time and space. Meals along the road were often punctuated by observation of small details. Pilgrims noticed the texture of bread crust, the smoothness of cheese, or the color of dried fruit. They observed birds feeding nearby, the play of sunlight on hedgerows, or the patterns of stones lining the path. Each bite became part of a larger awareness of the environment, blending nourishment with observation and reflection. In this way, food was inseparable from the rhythm of walking, rest, and attention, forming a seamless experience that nurtured body, mind, and spirit. Even when food was sparse, the act of eating grind significant. A thin slice of bread, a small wedge of cheese, or a single dried fruit was consumed slowly and with gratitude. Pilgrims learned to recognize the value of moderation, to appreciate sustenance for both its physical and emotional impact. Each simple meal reinforced patience and careful attention, providing energy for the next stretch of road while cultivating calm, focus, and a sense of measured accomplishment. Small rituals accompanied meals, unwrapping bread, slicing cheese, pouring water, and arranging modest portions were repeated with gentle attention. Travelers often paused to breathe in sense, observe light and shadow, or listen to birdsong or wind in hedgerows. Even these quiet actions became part of the meditation of the road, blending sustenance with mindfulness. Each meal marked a chapter of the day, offering not only strength but also ahitham, a gentle structure to support both body and mind. Pilgrims came to understand the relationship between walking, fatigue, and nourishment. Meals were deliberately spaced, portions adjusted according to exertion and remaining distance. Eating slowly, chewing carefully, and drinking deliberately became a method of pacing botanology and awareness. Travelers noted the subtle effects of food on strength, mood, and attention, integrating observar and preparation into a holistic approach to the day's journey. Even small gestures, such as breaking bread for a companion or sharing a few nuts, reinforced calm and connection, sustaining both physical and emotional needs. Even solitary travelers found nourishment in observation and ritual. Sitting beneath a tree or on a low wall, they unwrapped their modest provisions with care, ate slowly, and observed the streams, hedgerows, wildflowers, and distant villages became companions alongside bread and cheese. Pilgrims learned that the simplest meals, when attended to with mindfulness, could offer profound satisfaction. The sensory richness of taste, texture, sound, and sight combined with deliberate slowness, cultivating calm and a subtle joy that carried across miles of stone-lined paths. Nightfall brought the final meal of the day. Travelers sought inns or wayside shelters, settling near hearths, fires, or stoves. Stews, bread, and preserved foods were consumed in quiet, calm settings, often accompanied by faint conversations or the occasional glance at fellow pilgrims. The warmth of the fire, the smell of cooking, and the comfort of simple food created a restorative pause before sleep. Pilgrims reflected on the day's journey, appreciating the nourishment received, and preparing mind and body for the following day. These evening meals provided a sense of closure, wrapping the day in warmth, sustenance, and calm. Even when roads were empty and meals taken alone, the quiet act of eating carried significance. Travelers learned to recognize the subtle rhythms of consumption, the satisfaction of moderate portions, and the restorative qualities of attention. Bread, cheese, fruit, nuts, and stew were more than sustenance. They were companions on the road, sustaining both body and spirit. Each meal, simple and deliberate, became a meditation on gratitude, patience, and observation, offering calm for the miles yet to come. Through all seasons, simple meals shaped the pilgrimage experience. Spring greens, summer fruits, autumn roots, and winter provisions became markers of time and environment. Pilgrims saturned themselves to seasonal shifts, appreciating the subtle flavors and textures offered by each period. Evenmidst fare, when approached with attention and mindfulness, became a source of delight and energy. Travelers learned that nourishment was inseparable from rhythm, observation, and calm attention, forming a consistent and sustaining aspect of life along the road. Ultimately, the meals of the pilgrimage were not feasts, but steady sustenance, weaving together body, mind, and landscape. Bread and cheese, stew and fruit, shared or solitary, punctuated the day with rhythm, reflection, and calm. Pilgrims moved from one stretch of road to the next with renewed energy, aware of the nourishment received and attentive to the world surrounding them. Food became aquiote, anchor, a companion, and a source of gentle encouragement, sustaining each step along the ancient stone sof, the journey. Pilgrims traveling along the ancient roads carried little with them, yet every object had purpose, meaning, and significance. The first essential was often a sturdy wooden staff, smooth from years of handling, its surface shaped by both hands and weather. The staff offered support on uneven paths, a steadying presence as feet traced worn stones and soft dirt alike. More than a practical tool, it became a companion on long, quiet stretches, tapping rhythmically against the earth, guiding steps, and reinforcing balance. In moments of rest, the staff could lean against a wall or stone, its familiar weight providing reassurance even when not held. Walking with Astav taught pilgrims patience, careful observation, and an intimate awareness of each step. Each tap on stone or soil became a small conversation between traveler, tool, and road, a gentle rhythm that marked the passage of time and distance. Alongside the staff, travelers carried small satchels or pouches. These were carefully packed essentials ranging from bread, cheese, and dried fruits to small flasks of water or herbal remedies. The satchel was worn over a shoulder or slung across the back, its weight light but balanced, designed to allow ease of movement over long distances. Each item inside the satchel was chosen with intention, minimizing Gunnesary's burden while ensuring survival, comfort, and modest indulgence along the journey. Pilgrims learned reach carefully into the satchel, unpacking each item with gentle hands, savoring the textures, smells, and tastes as they did so. The satchel became an extension of the traveler's body, a container not only of nourishment but of reassurance, a portable capsule of stability on the unpredictable path. Water was carried in simple vessels, flasks or water skins, often made of treated leather, sewn carefully to hold liquid without leakage. The weight of water provided both sustenance and rhythm. Travelers learned to sip deliberately, noticing the coolness against lips and the way liquid flowed to ease thirst and fatigue. Filling these containers required attention to streams, wells, or village fountains, observing clarity and cleanliness before drinking. Each sip, whether taken alone beneath a tree or shared with a companion, became a quiet ritual, a moment of pause that intertwined with walking, thinking, and observing. Water, though essential, was also a companion, reminding pilgrims of care, presence, and the slow unfolding of the day. Shoes, simple yet durable, bore the brunt of the journey. Thick leather soles slowly thinned under repeated contact with cobbles, packed dirt, and moss-covered stones. Travelers became attuned to every step, noticing the subtle textures beneath their feet, adjusting stride and weight as wear increased. Shoes shaped the experience of the road. Walking became deliberate, mindful, and sensitive to the terrain. Pilgrims polished, tightened, or repaired footwear when possible. Understanding that these simple tools were crucial for endurance. The act of putting on, adjusting, and removing shoes became ritualized, a deliberate moment of care for the body and its connection to the path. Each worn sole told a story after Steins traveled, weather endured, and steady persistence across the seasons. Some travelers wore shells or small emblems on their cloaks, signifying intention and purpose. The scallop shell, polished and visible, identified the pilgrim's path and devotion. Beyond its symbolic meaning, the shell also provided a visual rhythm, catching sunlight or reflecting shadows during the long walk. Travelers occasionally brushed dust or dew from the shell, a gentle act that reminded them of both purpose and continuity. Cloaks themselves, simple and functional, provided warmth in morning chill, protection from rain, and shelter from wind or sun. They were wrapped, tied, or adjusted in ways that reflected both care and experience, forming a tactile connection to Thetravella's body, weather, and environment. Knives and small tools, carried with care, provided practical solutions to minor challenges. A small blade could cut bread, prepare herbs, adjust clothing, or aid in minor repairs to their belongings. Pilgrims treated these tools with respect, keeping them clean, sharp, and secure. Their use was deliberate, measured, and unobtrusive, ensuring that utility was balanced with mindfulness. Even in the simple stacks of slicing bread or sharpening a stick, the tools provided rhythm and focus, enhancing both comfort and calm along the road. The presence of these modest instruments highlighted the careful balance between necessity and awareness, emphasizing quality over quantity, deliberation over haste. The preparation and maintenance of tools became a morning ritual. Pilgrims inspected shoes for wear, staff for cracks, satchels for secure closures, and water skins for leaks. Cloaks were adjusted, shells polished, and knives cleaned and tested. These simple, repeated actions grounded the traveler, creating a predictable rhythm at the start of each day. Such attentiveness not only ensured physical readiness, but cultivated calm, focus, and a quiet satisfaction. Travelers learned to recognize that careful preparation enhanced comfort and endurance, making each step easier, safer, and more meditative. Interaction with tools extended into pauses along the way. Pilgrims rested against walls or stones, leaned on staffs, adjusted satchels, sipped water, or observed the surrounding landscape. Even small adjustments, the tightening of straps, the shifting of weight, or the careful repositioning of a cloak became exercises in mindfulness. Travelers noted texture underfoot, the tilt of the sun on a stone, the rustle of leaves in hedgerows, and the gentle movement of water in nearby streams. Each interaction reinforced awareness, embedding the tools within the broader experience of walking, observing, and being present. Seasonal changes affected how tools were used and cared for. In spring, soft ground and rain required careful footing and waterproofing of satchels or cloaks. Summer brought dust and heat, demanding attention to water supplies and shoe comfort. Autumn's fallen leaves and slippery paths encouraged careful staff placement and cautious steps. Winter frost hardened soil and stones, making shoes and staff essential for stability and cloaks vital for warmth. Each season required adjustments, teaching pilgrims attentiveness, flexibility, and respect for both tools and environment. Travelers learned that mindfulness in preparation was as vital as the journey itself. Tools carried symbolic weight beyond practicality. The staff represented endurance and companionship. The satchel held not only provisions, but assurance and security. Water signified life, mindfulness, and care. Shoes connected body to path, registering distance, rhythm, and texture. Cloaks protected, signaled intention, and provided comfort. Shells marked purpose and devotion. Even knives and small instruments reminded pilgrims of self-sufficiency, preparedness, and attention to detail. Each item, modest though it might appear, carried layered meaning, reflecting a philosophy of simplicity, awareness, and quiet presence. Even on solitary stretches of road, tools offered connection. Pilgrims felt the staff beneath their hand, sensed the satchel shifting with movement, and noted the protective embrace of a cloak. Water was sipped carefully, shoes tested for grip, and small implements handled with mindful repetition. These interactions were meditative, a dialogue between traveler, tool, and landscape. Each moment reinforced patience, endurance, and attentiveness, reminding pilgrims that the road itself was both teacher and companion. Rivers, hills, and forests shaped the use of tools. Staffs aided in crossing streams, descending slopes, or ground satchels allowed balance while traversing narrow paths. Shoes gripped varied terrain, water offered relief and sustenance, and cloaks shielded from weather. The interplay of tool and environment ensured careful attention, fostering rhythm, awareness, and calm. Travelers learned that each object's value was heightened in relationship with surroundings, and that endurance was cultivated as much by mindfulness as by physical effort. Social interaction occasionally enhanced the role of tools. Pilgrims might offer a strap, assist in lifting a satchel, or lend a staff to aid a companion temporarily. Water was shared, advice given on shoe repair, and small implements passed along for practical use. These acts of subtle cooperation reinforced connection, trust, and empathy. Tools became shared experiences, reinforcing both practical and emotional support. Event-midst items contributed to a sense of community along the road, intertwining utility with quiet human connection. Through repetition, tools formed the rhythm of the day. Walking, pausing, adjusting possessions, sipping water, and eating small meals were woven together into cycles of attentive action. The staff tapped stone, satchels shifted with steps, shoes registered texture, and cloaks provided both comfort and protection. Travelers became attuned to patterns of movement, pace, and bodily response, cultivating endurance, patience, and calm. Tools were not burdens, but extensions of attention, amplifying awareness and sustaining both body and spirit. The road, even minor repairs required care and deliberation. Travelers patched worn soles, sharpened blades, reinforced straps, or smoothed folds in cloaks. These actions demanded observation, subtle skill, and time. Each adjustment restored utility and comfort, while reinforcing mindfulness, patience, and respect for persistence. The pilgrim's relationship with tools was ongoing, continuous, and intimate, reflecting a philosophy in which simplicity, attention, and care were inseparable from travel and survival. Ultimately, the tools of Theravela were less about possession than about purpose. Each item reflected careful choice, thoughtful maintenance, and attentive use. The staff, satchel, water, shoes, cloak, shell, and knife formed a modest ensemble that enabled movement, observation, and endurance. Travelers learned to read their tools as companions, understanding subtle messages in wear, weight, and placement. The road itself became the true companion. But these objects extended the pilgrim's capacity for presence, mindfulness, and steady progress through all seasons, weather, and landscapes. Tools sustained pilgrims in body, mind, and spirit. They provided rhythm, structure, and reassurance, fostering calm attention to each step, each pause, and each horizon. Travelers survived, adapted, and cared for their possessions, finding in simplicity both resilience and tranquility. Each object, no matter how modest, carried layers of meaning, practical, symbolic, emotional. In attentive use, tools become part of the meditation of travel, quiet anchors in the unfolding journey along stone-lined roads, shadowed groves, and distant hills. Though many pilgrims set out along the ancient roads alone, companionship often appeared naturally, quietly, and without ceremony. Travelers met one another on sunlit paths, under the shade of hedgerows, or at the bend of a stream, and an unspoken recognition of shared purpose formed between them. These encounters required no formal introduction. Sometimes a nod, a smile, or a simple acknowledgement of presence was enough to establish connection. Companionship along the pilgrimage route was deliberate in its simplicity, shaped less by words than by shared rhythm. The quiet echo of steps upon stone, gravel, or soft earth. Strangers walked together for hours, sometimes in conversation, sometimes in silence, each aware of the other's presence but unburdened by expectation. The very act of walking side by side created a gentle intimacy, a bond born of patience, observation, and mutual endurance. Stories were shared as naturally as breaths along the path. Travelers recounted experiences from home villages, small victories on earlier journeys, or the nuances of landscapes they had crossed before. Sometimes tales were humorous, drawing quiet laughter beneath the trees or along quiet lanes, their sound carrying lightly across fields and hills. Other times, stories were more reflective, pondering hardships, blessings, or lessons learned from the road. These narratives were rarely long or structured. Instead, they were spontaneous, shaped by mood, landscape, or the time of day. Pilgrims listened attentively, offering Ned's brief responses or thoughtful silence. The exchange of stories, songs, and reflections transformed Thejani into a shared tapestry of memory and observation. Even when the companionship lasted only a day or a few hours, silence, too, held its own place in these quiet unions. Walking side by side without speaking encouraged observation, attentiveness, and contemplation. Travelers noticed subtle gestures, the shifting of azotile, the tap of a staff, the adjustment of a cloak, creating a dialogue of movement rather than words. Footfalls aligned with the terrain. Water trickled in distant streams. Birds sang in hedgerows, and wind rustled leaves. The shared awareness of these sounds became a form of communion. Pilgrims often felt a calming effect in this mutual silence, recognizing that togetherness need not be loud or demonstrative, but simply present. In this way, quiet companionship was a meditation as much as a connection, reinforcing rhythm, mindfulness, and endurance along the road. At midday, companions often paused together beneath a tree, beside a brook, or on a moss-covered wall, sharing simple provisions. Bread, cheese, dried fruit, or a small portion of stew was unpacked and offered, sometimes shared from a single container, sometimes divided with gentle care. Small acts of generosity, even among brief acquaintances, carried weight far beyond the physical nourishment of it. Sharing a morsel of food established trust, warmth, and a sense of belonging. However fleeting, pilgrims came to understand that the act of eating together, in measured calm and attentiveness, reinforced bond subtly and enduringly than conversation alone. Each shared meal was a quiet gesture of friendship, reinforcing the human connection amid solitude and distance. Evening gatherings, though modest, left lasting impressions. Travelers sometimes arranged themselves around small fires along the road, the flames flickering against stone or wood, casting shadows and soft warmth. Smoke curled upward, mingling with the scent of cooking or the surrounding forest, creating a sensory frame for conversation, reflection, and companionship. These fires, glowing like distant stars along the path, drew pilgrims together naturally, offering comfort after long hours of walking. The shared presence, the gentle crackle of flame, and the ritual of preparing simpler sustenance formed a tableau of quiet community. Companionship at these fires did not require words. The warmth of human presence alone was enough to foster connection, calm, and reflection. Travelers often discovered that companionship was most profound, precisely because it was ephemeral. Many friendships along the pilgrimage lasted only a day or a few hours, ending as pilgrims diverged at crossroads, villages, or streams. Yet even brief encounters were deeply felt, leaving impressions etched into memory as vividly as the stones lining the route. Pilgrims recalled gestures, shared stories, laughter, and mutual care long after paths separated. These temporary unions reinforced the understanding that companionship need not be permanent to be meaningful, and that even fleeting presence could enrich a journey with reassurance, attention, and warmth. Along the road, companionship extended beyond immediate conversation or shared meals. Observing Anathertravela's gait, the careful handling of possessions, or the rhythm of steps alongside one's own became a form of subtle communication. A gentle adjustment of a satchel strap, a brief nod in response to weather changes, or caution on slippery ground, reinforced awareness and attentiveness. Travelers learned to attune to one another, not only verbally but physically, recognizing signals of fatigue, caution, or joy. Walking together created a quiet symbiosis, each companion supporting and responding to the other through gesture, rhythm, and presence. Children, merchants, and occasional wandering performers occasionally became part of these quiet walks, their songs, laughter, or brief stories interwove with pilgrims' own rhythms, adding layers of sound, color, and rhythm to the shared journey. Even the presence of strangers passing by along lanes or streams offered fleeting companionship, reminding travelers of the continuous human thread along the road. Pilgrims often observed such interactions with gentle awareness, recognizing the communal, interwoven nature of travel. Each meeting, however brief, contributed to a sense of continuity, shared humanity, and gentle attentiveness to through. Weather also shaped companionship. During rain, travelers huddled beneath trees, cloaks drawn tight, sharing the quiet comfort of mutual shelter. Snow or frost encouraged closer proximity around fires, hands warmed not only by flame but by shared awareness. Summer heat invited pauses in the shade, conversations met by the calm of heat-bathed fields. Pilgrims learned to recognize that companionship was often heightened by circumstance. That shared experience of nature's rhythms and challenges created bonds as enduring as stone, moss, or running water along the path. Long hours of walking encouraged observation, reflection, and tacit conversation. Pilgrims attuned themselves to one another's pace, adjusting steps to maintain proximity without forcing effort. Silence became a companion in its own right, allowing shared awareness without intrusion. Travelers noted how a companion shifted weight, tapped a staff, or adjusted a satchel, integrating observation to gentle interaction. Over time, these subtleties formed a layered understanding of mutual presence, where a companionship was expressed through rhythm, attention, and sensitivity rather than solely through words or gestures. Shared challenges strengthened these bonds. Crossing streams, ascending hills, or navigating slippery paths encouraged mutual care and attentiveness. Travelers offered hands, staffs, or gentle guidance, creating acquiescent interdependence. Even minor assistance, a steadying touch, a shared laugh at minor mishap, or the exchange of water-enhanced connection. Pilgrims recognized the simplicity and depth of such support, understanding that the journey itself nurtured attentiveness, empathy, and solidarity. The road became a teacher of subtle, enduring human connection, demonstrating that quiet companionship often required neither speech nor permanence to leave lasting impact. Sometimes, companions shared practical advice. A traveler might point out a safer crossing, offer guidance about the condition of distant paths, or recommend a nearby inn. These exchanges were offered without expectation or imposition, shaped by care rather than authority. Travelers learned to accept guidance with gratitude, responding in kind when opportunity arose. Such moments of shared attention strengthened trust and reinforced awareness of both environment and the continuous human thread along the pilgrimage. Advice, when offered gently, became a quiet gesture of fellowship, enhancing both safety and connection. The rhythm of companionship often mirrored the rhythm of the road. Steps synchronizedly, pauses coincided, and meals were taken in unison. Travelers attuned themselves to this harmony, finding reassurance in the continuity it provided. Silence, conversation, laughter, or shared observation all become part of the steady cadence of travel, forming a gentle, unbroken bond across hours of walking. Companionship, like stones marking the route, became a subtle guide, structuring perception of distance, time, and effort in ways both practical and comforting. Pilgrims also discovered that companionship required patience. Differences in pace, endurance, or preference were navigated with care. Travelers allowed each other space while maintaining gentle proximity, offering support when needed without imposing, observing a companion's rhythms, adjusting one's own, and responding subtly created a shared understanding that was quiet yet profound. In this way, patience became both a necessity and a gift, fostering endurance, awareness, and calm. Even solitary travelers carried memories of previous companions, a story shared, a meal eaten together, or a fire around which warmth was felt left impressions that carried forward. Pilgrims often reflected on these interactions, finding comfort and continuity in recollection. The road itself preserved such memories. Leaning stones, rustling trees, streams, and distant hills acted as anchors for recollection. Companionship, though ephemeral, became part of the enduring fabric of pilgrimage, interwoven with landscape, season, and memory. Nightfall intensified campions, fires glowed along the roadside, small clusters of travelers gathered to rest, eat, or share a conversation. Stars twinkled overhead, the air carried the scent of wood smoke, and distant hills softened into shadow. Travelers felt the presence of others more keenly in these quiet hours, the shared space reinforcing calm and connection. Even when conversation was minimal, the warmth of collective presence offered reassurance, grounding pilgrims in both environment and human network. Pilgrims also found inspiration in companionship, observing how others carried themselves, handled possessions, or interacted with environment offered subtle sense in endurance, patience, and mindfulness. Travelers learned from one another without explicit instruction, integrating these observations into their own practice of walking, observing, and attending to both body and spirit. The road became a classroom, companions both peers and teachers, offering insight through presence, rhythm, and quiet example. Through all seasons, landscapes, and circumstances, companionship experience. Spring blooms, summer heat, autumn winds, and winter frost were observed together, reflected upon together, and experienced as shared phenomena. Pilgrims developed mutual attentiveness to the environment and each other, creating layers of awareness and memory that persisted far beyond the physical journey. Even brief interactions contributed to understanding, calm, and presence, reinforcing the gentle rhythm of pilgrimage. Ultimately, quiet companionship was woven from small gestures, shared observation, and synchronized steps. Words, when spoken, were gentle and considerate, and silence was embraced as an equal companion. Shared meals, stories, or advice formed threads of connection, while mutual attention to terrain, rhythm, and environment created subtle bonds of understanding. Travelers learned that companionship need not be constant or permanent to be meaningful. Even fleeting presence enriched experience, leaving impressions as enduring as the stones, streams, and hedgerows of the path. The road, stones, streams, trees, and skies became witnesses to these interactions. Footsteps aligned, stories were shared, fires flickered, and simple gestures communicated care, respect, and attention. Travelers departed from one another at crossroads or village edges, yet memories of shared rhythm and quiet connection lingered. Pilgrims recognized that the essence of companionship lay not in permanence but in presence, attentiveness, and the gentle, shared passage of time along the pilgrimage road. Pilgrims moving along ancient roads often passed through villages where life unfolded in its quiet measured rhythm. Each settlement had its own pace, its own small routines, and its own familiar smells and sounds. Smoke rose steadily from chimneys, curling lazily into the sky, carrying the scent of hearth fires burning wood or coal. Women bent over spinning wheels, their hands moving deftly as wool twisted and thickened into thread. The gentle hum of wheels turning, and the soft rhythm of hands shaping fiber created a steady background music, a cadence as calming as the tapping of a staff against worn stone. Children ran errands, carrying buckets of water from wells, their laughter and shouts lightly echoing off the timbered houses and stone walls. Pilgrims observed these movements quietly, often slowing their pace too. Take in the rhythm of the village, feeling a sense of ease in the gentle continuity of daily life. Blacksmiths worked steadily, their hammers ringing softly on iron, producing sparks that glinted in the sun. The sound, though sharp at moments, was a measured and familiar pattern, a heartbeat of human industry. Pilgrims passing by might pause to watch the careful shaping of tools, nails, or horseshoes, noting the precision and care involved. These moments offered quiet fascination, a a chance to observe the skill of hands attuned to their craft. The blacksmith's fire glowed steadily, a beacon in the yard or workshop, reminding travelers of warmth and presence. Even brief interactions, a nod of acknowledgement or a murmured greeting, reinforced the gentle connection between those who lived in the village and those merely passing through. Hospitality was simple, unobtrusive, and welcoming. A pilgrim might be offered a bench outside, a small inn or cottage to rest tired feet, a cup of weak ale or warm water, or a place to refill a water skin. Meals were humble, often bread, cheese, or a stew simmered over the hearth, yet their warmth and sustenance so carried both comfort and encouragement. Villagers provided these gestures not for show, but as quiet acts of kindness, extending the rhythm of daily life to travelers. Pilgrims, in turn, offered polite thanks, smiles, or brief conversation, creating a loop of gentle acknowledgement and mutual respect. These interactions, modest Thorthia would punctuated the journey with moments of care and attention, allowing travelers to experience the human heart of the road as deeply as the stones beneath their feet. Paths through villages were lined with low houses, some with thatched roofs and wooden shutters, others of stone with small gardens growing herbs, vegetables, or flowers. The architecture was modest but purposeful, reflecting both practical needs and local traditions. Pilgrims noticed the patterns of rooftops, the arrangement of courtyards, and the ways people moved between house, garden, and street. Even small details, such as the placement of a bench outside a door, a hanging lantern, or a drying line of cloth, contributed to the sense of rhythm and familiarity. Walking through Theus villages offered a subtle shift in experience. The road's pace slowed, senses sharpened, and awareness deepened, allowing travelers to savor observation and reflection in equal measure. Village markets, when present, were regimental gatherings rather than bustling centers. Farmers displayed vegetables, grains, and herbs on simple tables or cloths, while artisans offered pots, baskets, or textiles. Pilgrims passing through often walked quietly among stalls, noticing color, texture, and arrangement rather than hurrying to purchase. Occasionally, small conversations emerged, a merchant describing produce, a farmer recommending a nearby spring, or a chilled offering a smile. These interactions, though brief, enriched the traveler's experience, embedding the road within a living, breathing human environment. Markets, with their careful rhythm and muted energy, created pause along the journey, grounding pilgrims in observation, attention, and appreciation. The sounds of villages sextoned beyond human activity. Chickens clucked softly, dogs padded along lanes, and cats slinked between buildings, their movements subtle but persistent. Occasionally, bells from a nearby church marked the hour, blending with the clatter of wooden wheels on cobblestones or the distant call of a shepherd guiding sheep across a field. These sounds formed a layered symphony, integrating natural, animal, and human rhythms into a cohesive background that travelers absorbed unconsciously. Each footstep across the village was cushioned not only by soft earth or stone, but by this gentle orchestration of life, providing calm continuity along the road. Pilgrims often paused to rest against walls, under trees, or near fountains, observing both village life and the broader landscape. Streams, hedgerows, and distant hills framed the settlement, reminding travelers that village were part of a continuous network along the road. These pauses offered time to refill water skins, adjust satchels, or simply breathe, noticing the interplay of sun, shade, wind, and scent. Each village provided not only physical respite, but a mental and emotional pause, a moment of grounding amid movement, reflection amid observation, and connection amid solitude. Evening in a village carried its own gentle cadence. Smoke rose from chimneys, doors were closed softly, and children's laughter faded as playtime ended. Fires glowed in hearths, illuminating ginters with steady warmth and casting flickering shadows along walls. Pilgrims witnessed the transition of villages from day to night, observing simple rituals, meals finished, tools cleaned, cloaks hung, and lamps lit. These small acts reinforced the sense of rhythm, continuity, and care that extended along the road, creating a layered experience of time, place, and presence. Even brief visits allowed travelers to feel part of this ongoing cycle, attuning themselves to both human and environmental patterns. Villages also shaped perception of distance and progress. Each settlement marked a point along the road, a pause. Between stretches of stones and fields, travelers measured journeys not only in miles, but in the sequence of villages passed, noting familiar signasak as a well, a bridge, or a particular tree by the lane. Pilgrims internalized these markers as part of their mental map, allowing the landscape to feel both ordered and welcoming. Villages, with their familiar routines and simple structures, provided assurance that the road was navigable, predictable, and alive, even as each day brought new horizons, challenges, and observations. Interactions with villagers often left lasting impressions. A brief conversation with a baker, a nod from a child, or the quiet observation of spinning wool could embed itself in memory, recalled years later as a gentle reminder of human kindness and presence. Pilgrims learned to notice his subtleties, the manner of tending animals, the way doors were opened, the placement of firewood, or the careful alignment of vegetables in a stall. These observations, though seemingly mundane, contributed to a deep of rhythm, care, and quiet persistence, reinforcing both awareness and mindfulness along even travelers passing silently through found connection in visual observation. Watching women at work, children playing, or blacksmiths shaping iron provided subtle companionship through observation. Pilgrims noted posture, expression, and movement, attuning themselves to the small narratives of daily life. These insights enriched the experience of travel, allowing the road to feel populated with life, even when words were scarce. Observation became a gentle form of engagement, a meditation in attention and presence that complemented the rhythm of walking. Seasonal changes altered village experience. Spring brought the bloom of flowers, freshly tilled gardens, and renewed energy in markets and yards. Summer offered long days, warm sun, and the occasional splash of rain refreshing streets and wells. Autumn painted fields and orchards in deep hues, the scent of harvest blending with wood smoke from chimneys. Winter brought frost, softer light, and hushed the villages as residents attended to hearths and indoor tasks. Pilgrims learned to adjust pace, observation, and interaction according to the season, allowing the road and the settlements along it to shape their rhythms, attentiveness, and appreciation of landscape and community alike. Villages also provided subtle instruction in resilience and continuity, seeing the repetition of daily life, the preparation of food, tending of animals, and care of tools and homes reminded pilgrims of enduring human rhythms. Travelers witnessed persistence across generations, roofs maintained, paths cleared, fires tended, and simple acts of kindness repeated day after day. These lessons, absorbed quietly, reflected the long-standing patterns of human care and continuity, reminding pilgrims that endurance, attention, and mindfulness were cultivated as much through observation as through personal effort. Footpaths connecting villages were lined with hedges, small shrines, or worn stones, marking continuity along the road. Pilgrims noticed these details in context with village life, integrating observation of people, tools, and structures with landscape awareness. Each segment of road became a thread in a larger tapestry, linking settlements and guiding attention from the familiar to the distant. Villages, with their modern structures and gentle routines, were points of reflection, anchoring memory, and pacing along the long journey. Even brief pauses allowed pilgrims to feel rooted, sitting on a low bench outside a cottage, feeling the warmth of a sunlit wall, or hearing the distant hammer of the blacksmith's hammer. Travelers absorbed the texture of life. The road became a sequence of sensory impressions, scents of bread, herbs, and hearth smoke, sounds of water, animals, and gentle conversation, sights of timber-bird walls, gardens, and distant hills. Each village contributed to this layered experience, offering continuity, reassurance, and rhythm amid the broader uncertainty of travel. Pilgrims often carried impressions of multiple villages in memory, creating a mental map of the road. Included small details, the curve of a lane, the position of a well, the arrangement of a garden, the texture of stone, or the sound of a bell. Even fleeting moments watching children play, observing smoke rise from chimneys, or noting the glint of a blacksmith's hammer contributed to a deep sense of connection with landscape and its people. These memories, layered and detailed, became part of the quiet rhythm of pilgrimage, weaving together observation, experience, and reflection. Ultimately, villages along the pilgrimage were more than rest stops or markers of distance. They were living threads in the fabric of the journey, reinforcing rhythm, awareness, and calm observation. Pilgrims learned to appreciate both the utility and quiet beauty of these settlements, understanding that each pause contributed to endurance, reflection, and gentle companionship with landscape and people alike. Villages offered both practical support and meditative experience, anchoring the journey in the rhythms of human life and the steady presence of enduring roads. And evening brought a gentle hush over the ancient pilgrimage roads, a slow quieting of the world that seemed to stretch across fields, villages, and stone-lined lanes alike. As the sun dipped below distant hills, its last light softened into amber and rose, fading gradually into pale violet, then deep blue, as twilight drew its curtain across the landscape. Shadows stretched from hedgerows, cottages, and standing stones, folding the familiar Cenerento's quiet mystery. Pilgrims, aware of the day's effort, often slowed their pace, taking stock of surroundings, adjusting satchels, and tracing the path of their staff on familiar stones. The air grew cooler with each passing hour, carrying the scent of damp earth, dewled on grass, and the lingering fragrance of hay stored in nearby barns. Occasionally, a distant hearth flickered, its smoke curling lazily skyward, a small beacon of warmth and human presence amid the encroaching dark. As stars emerged gradually, one by one, the landscape transformed. Night revealed itself slowly. First, the first pale pinpricks of light, then clusters of constellations shining with certainty. Pilgrims lifted their gaze, momentarily pausing on the quiet majesty above. Some whispered quiet thanks or prayers, their voices barely rising above the murmur of wind or the soft rustle of leaves. Others let their minds wander, contemplating the miles traversed and those yet ahead, the path beneath their feet illuminated only by memory, moonlight, or flickering lanterns. Even as darkness deepened, the stones remained patient companions, their forms hidden but steady beneath footfalls, guiding without ceremony, reminding trovers of the road's constancy through both light and shadow. The sounds of evening were subtle but vivid, forming a delicate backdrop to the pilgrim's experience. Crickets chirped in the grass along hedgerows, owls called softly from distant trees, their wings slicing the air almost silently. Occasionally, a stream gurgled, weaving around stones and under small wooden bridges, a whispering companion to those walking nearby. Leaves rustled under night wind, and distant dogs barked once or twice before returning to silence. In ordinary noises, travelers found reassurance. The world continued in quiet rhythm, each sound part of a larger, comforting continuity. Night was not empty or threatening. Rather, it was measured, alive in its gentle patterns, and patiently awaiting each pilgrim's step. Pilgrims frequently paused as darkness deepened, some at a mesnea, a cottage or barn, other times under the shade of an old oak or beside a quiet brook. Here, the day's fatigue could be eased by rest, stretching, or tending to boots, cloaks, and satchels. Fires, kindled carefully at testaments, offered warmth against the cool air. The crackle of burning wood, small sparks floating upward, and the gentle amber glow created a private circle of calm. Travelers might settle around such a fire, sharing water, simple bread, or cheese, exchanging few words, or simply basking in collective presence. Even when alone, the presence of a flickering fire offered solace, marking a temporary home in the vast, darkened landscape. Lanterns occasionally swung gently from branches or hooks, their light soft and wavering, revealing sections of the path, reassuring clarity. These small illuminations highlighted the subtle textures of the stones beneath feet, the uneven contours of packed dirt, or the gentle incline of a hill. Pilgrims learned to walk slowly at night, adjusting to shifting shadows and reduced visibility, developing awareness of each step, the weight of pack, and the presence of companion travelers. This attentiveness was not tense but meditative, creating a rhythm between movement and observation, aligning breath with footfalls, and syncing perception with the steady pulse of the road itself. Silence, more pronounced at night, became a companion. In its own right, travelers discovered that quiet enhanced observation, encouraging both reflection and receptiveness to subtle changes in the environment. The glimmer of dew on leaves, the shimmer of moonlight across a distant field, the soft glow of a far-off village hall. These details became more prominent, woven into a rich tapestry of sensory awareness. Even minor sounds, the crack of a twig underfoot, The flap of a bird startled from its perch were magnified, offering both alertness and connection to the surrounding world. In such stillness, pilgrims often felt a profound calm, their mind slowing alongside the soft rhythm of the night. The night also offered moments of companionship, quiet and unobtrusive. Travelers walking in pairs or small groups developed an unspoken rhythm, adjusting pace, spacing, and steps to maintain quiet togetherness. Words, when spoken, were minimal and gentle, exchanged in hushed tones. Sometimes travelers shared a small meal beside a fire or exchanged water, each gesture carrying more weight because of the scarcity and quiet of the night. The shared presence, even in silence, provided reassurance and comfort, a subtle reminder of human connection in a vast, often empty landscape. Pilgrims occasionally observed nocturnal animals, startled briefly by their movement before returning. Too quiet, foxes spattered lightly across fields, deer grazed at the edges of woods, and hedgehogs shuffled among undergrowth. Such encounters, though brief, reinforced the sense that life continued around them, persistent and unhurried. Travelers felt part of this nocturnal rhythm, aligned in step and perception with both human and non-human. Observing the subtle interplay of movement and silence deepened the sense of intimacy with the natural world, emphasizing observation, patience, and mindfulness. The stars themselves provided guidance, a celestial map for those attuned to the sky. Pilgrims occasionally lifted their gaze, orienting themselves to familiar constellations. Moonlight outlined distant hills, illuminated edges of hedgerows, and reflected off stones seamed along the path. Even the faintest glow of dawn in the east became a quiet anchor, hinting at the slow approach of morning. Travelers learned to walk by both memory and light, aligning body, mind, and steps with constancy of nature, the stones, and the soft pulse of the world around them. Weather shaped night experiences in subtle ways. A cool breeze offered respite from day's warmth, rustling leaves and carrying scents off earth, damp grass, or distant hay. Occasional mists formed along streams or low fields, softening the landscape and adding layers of calm and mystery. Pilgrims learned to adjust pace, steps, and attention according to these small shifts, observing the road, stones, and surrounding with gentle care. Even slight drifts encouraged reflection, slowing movement, heightening awareness, and enhancing the sense of rhythm in both nature and walking. Pilgrims often found themselves resting against stones, walls, or using their staff or pack to sit comfortably. The physical pause was mirrored mentally and emotionally, allowing reflection on the day's journey, the hours remaining, or the landscape ahead. Simple actions, retying a shoe, adjusting a cloak, or cleaning a satchel, became meditative, integrated into the quiet, ongoing rhythm of night. The road itself offered structure, continuity, and comfort. Each stone, each landmark, each curve became part of a subtle choreography of endurance, observation, and calm. Occasionally, a distant village provided lights from windows or chimneys, a reminder of warmth, shelter, and human presence. Travelers noted these points with quiet gratitude, feeling comforted by the continuity of life along the pilgrimage. Even when too far to reach, burnight deepened. The visual presence of homes, fires, and cultivated fields offered reassurance, a subtle reminder that solitude along the road was part of a larger, interconnected rhythm. Footsteps on night paths, their own rhythm, the gentle tap of staff on stone, the soft squish of damp earth, or the faint scrape of boots against gravel. Travelers became attuned to these sounds, noticing echoes, patterns, and subtle variations. Step by step, awareness deepened, pace slowed, and attention sharpened. Pilgrims often found this rhythm meditative, aligning breath and thought with the physicality of walking. Night travel, though slower and more deliberate, offered a profound sense of calm, focus, and mindfulness, transforming simple movement into a contemplative practice. Even when alone, pilgrims felt the presence of past travelers along the stones. Footprints, worn grooves, and the arrangement of waymarkers suggested continuity, as if the road itself bore witness to centuries of quiet passage. Travelers felt connected to those who had walked before, sensing both the endurance and patience embedded in the path. Stones, hidden under darkness yet felt beneath feet, provided reassurance and constancy, a silent companion that marked progress, endurance, and quiet perseverance through the night. Pilgrims' minds often wandered gently during night walks. Thoughts drifted from family to landscape, past journeys to anticipated steps ahead. Reflections were slow, unhurried, and often tinged with gratitude, wonder, or calm observation. Memories of companionship, simple meals, village pauses, and familiar stones, interwove with sensory impressions of the night, moonlight, wind, wood smoke, animal sounds, and rustling foliage. These threads formed a gentle tapestry of thought and perception, aligning body, mind, and path in harmony. As hours passed, some pilgrims found quiet sleep near fires, within temporary shelters, or under cloaks and blankets. Their transition from walking to rest was deliberate and soothing, mirroring the gradual fade of night itself. Even sleep became layered with the rhythm of the journey. Awareness of stone beneath, wind against the face, faint murmurs of animals or distant travelers, and the gentle glow of lanterns or embers. Resting within the night offered both recovery and reflection, consolidating memory, reinforcing calm, and preparing body and mind for the day ahead. By the deepest hours, when the world seemed most still, even the faintest signs of life fire, rustle of leaf, distant animal call became companions in quiet contemplation. The road, the stones, Deski, and the slow turning of night offered reassurance, presence, and gentle continuity. Travelers recognized that night, like day, held its own rhythm, its own lessons in patience, observation, and endurance. Even as footsteps paused and fires dimmed, the pilgrimage continued, marked not by haste but by the steady, careful passage of time, step by step, stone by stone. Long after the pilgrims themselves had moved on, leaving footprints that would fade with time, the stones along the pilgrimage routes remained. Some were modest and uncarved, simply placed with care along the earth, while others bore inscriptions, grooves, or faint images of devotion. Though weather and years had softened their clarity, moss crept over their surfaces, lending quiet color to otherwise gray and neutral tones. Lichen dotted their edges, and rain, frost, and sun had smoothed corners and surfaces into gentle curves that cradled the feet of those who passed. Each stone, whether large or small, rough or worn, carried within it a story of endurance and guidance. They reminded those who traveled or observed that the essence of the pilgrimage was not in haste, but in steady, mindful movement, each step unfolding slowly and deliberately along a path that had existed for. These stones bore witness to countless travelers, each with their own reasons for walking. Some moved in devotion, hearts focused on prayer or meditation. Others carried burdens, physical, emotional, or spiritual, hoping that the rhythm of footsteps on stone might soothe what weighed them. Children, Semetamisakam, tended elders for short stretches, learning the rhythm of walking, the practice of attention, and the calm patience of journeying. Families, neighbors, and solitary wanderers all intersected with these stones. Some teams brushing hands over their surfaces for reassurance, sometimes pausing merely to adjust a cloak or satchel, and occasionally pausing in quiet thought, allowing the stones to anchor a sense of presence in an otherwise fleeting world. The stones endured through the changing seasons, each marking time in subtle ways. In spring, wildflowers and grasses framed the stones, highlighting their presence as nature itself awakened. Pilgrims might stoop briefly to notice a sprouting bloom beside a stone, the juxtaposition of enduring rock and delicate life, a reminder of continuity and gentle patience. Summer brought long days, with sun warming the surfaces, and travelers brushing away small patches of dust, or dew. Children ran nearby, sometimes tracing the edges of thunstones with tiny feet, learning from instinct the rhythm of the road. Autumn introduced cooler air, the scent of fallen leaves, and occasional drifts of wind that scattered seeds and whispers of sound across the path. Stones, now mottled with moss and softened by rain, seemed to invite reflection, marking not only physical distance but cycles of time itself. Winter draped stones in frost or light snow, quieting the landscape, softening edges, and making travelers slow their pace. Each season revealed new qualities in these enduring markers, reminding walkers of the constancy embedded in change. Villages and hamlets along the pilgrimage routes often formed around clusters of stones, or vice versa. Stones became markers for boundaries, wells, or gathering points. Travelers resting against them observed villagers tending hearths, spinning wool, or preparing meals. Even when the village moved on or grew, the stones remained, anchoring memory and human activity. The soft hum of daily life, laughter hammering, the drip of water from a well interacted with the permanence of stone, creating alien perception of time, fleeting moments of human life recorded against enduring presence. Pilgrims pause to observe, learning the rhythm of settlement, the steady pace of ordinary labor, and the quiet elegance of continuity. Beyond villages, the stones guided travelers across fields, hills, and rivers. Some were placed singly at critical points, a junction where two roads met, a stream crossing, or a hilltop with a broad view. Others were aligned in sequences, leading pilgrims along gentle curves or marking distances. Travelers traced them with fingers, noted their presence with eyes, and allowed them to set pace and attention. Even when hidden under grass, snow, or fallen leaves, the stones maintained their role, unseen but present, guiding in subtle and almost imperceptible ways. The lesson of these markers was patience, that travel need not be hurried, that guide comes quietly, and that steady, repeated steps build lasting paths across both terrain and memory. Thus stones also carried an emotional legacy. Pilgrims, feeling weary, sometimes rested hands upon their surfaces. The cool solidity provided reassurance. The faint grooves left by earlier travelers created a tactile sense of connection across time. Children learned through touch and observation. Elders reflected on journeys, and solitary walkers found solace in these silent companions. Stones became points of pause, not interruption. Travelers used them to adjust packs, to rest afoot, or simply to gather thoughts. In doing so, stones transcended their physicality. Takingon meaning as markers of endurance, continuity, and quiet meditation. Even inscriptions on carved stones, though faded by centuries of wind and rain, retained subtle stories. Names, prayers, and dates, barely discernible, hinted at devotion, hope, and intention. Pilgrims reading or tracing these carvings were reminded that human presence, however modest, could leave echoes across time. These echoes were not grand or imposing. They were simple, gentle, and reassuring. Stones taught travelers that history could be understood, not only through monuments or records, but through small, enduring markers, quietly integrated into everyday paths. The tactile experience of stones was central to their legacy. Walking along paths, pilgrims noticed the texture beneath their shoes, the irregularities that demanded attention, and the natural variations that made each stone unique. Hands brushed over surfaces smooth from centuries of steps, or rough with lichen and wear. This physicality created mindfulness, an awareness of touch and motion, rhythm and balance. The road became both practice and meditation, the stones offering constant feedback, shaping pace, posture, and presence. Travelers learned to observe, respect, and integrate with these quiet guides, aligning both body and mind with their enduring rivers, fields, and forests often accompanied these stones, and the interplay between natural landscape and human placement enriched experience. Stones were positioned to highlight safe crossings, dry patches, or gentle inclines. They guided without intrusion, blending with soil, grass, and stone. Travelers walked alongside streams, hearing water's steady murmur, watching reflections of sky and stars, and noting how stones anchored movement and attention. Fields offered visual cues, hedgerows provided shelter and direction, and the stones tied all elements together, providing a coherent framework for travel that balanced human design with natural form. Pilgrims often remarked internally on the constancy of these markers. Even as Villicest's forests shifted and rivers altered slightly over time, the stones endured. They reminded travelers that while human life is fleeting, small acts of care and placement can leave lasting guidance. The road itself became a living memory, each stone a sentence, each path a paragraph, composing a gentle narrative of movement, attention, and devotion. Travelers internalized this narrative, their own steps adding to a story begun centuries earlier, reinforcing the subtle connection between human intention and enduring physical presence. At night, the stones became companions in quiet reflection. Moonlight softened edges, shadows stretched across surfaces, and frost or dew added texture. Pilgrims resting beside these markers felt the constancy of the path beneath them, the assurance of continuity across time, and the calm of aligned rhythm with nature and history. Fires, lamps, or the distant glow of villages occasionally illuminated surfaces, creating a gentle interplay of light and shadow. Even unseen stones beneath earth or snow contributed to this sense of grounding. Travelers sensed them as part of the invisible scaffolding of their journey, patient, enduring, and present without demand. Over years and centuries, stories grew around the stones. Families passed knowledge of placement and significance from one generation to the next. Travelers taught children to notice them, to respect them, and to walk with attentiveness. Scholars, chroniclers, and those devoted to memory recorded locations and observations, blending empirical observation with quiet appreciation. Yet the essence remained. The stones were guides, not monuments, companions, not trophies, teachers of patience, not subjects of competition. The gentle legacy lay in their constancy, their integration with human and natural life, and their capacity to slow attention and align presence. Ultimately, the legacy of stones was subtle but profound. Pilgrims long gone left traces only in memory, observation, and written records, but the stones remained, holding history in their surfaces, contours, and placement. Travelers discovered that achievement need not be loud, progress need not be rapid, and guidance need not be flashy. Each step along stone-lined paths carried its own meaning. Each pause beside a weathered marker offered reflection, and each careful observation of landscape and human activity reinforced awareness, patience, and presence. Even in modern times, hikers, walkers, and pilgrims rediscover these roads. Muscovite, weathered, and softened by centuries, stones continue to guide movement and attention. Travelers pause, adjust packs, trace surfaces, or simply stand in quiet reflection. The road, marked by these enduring markers, invites the Sama meditation, the same rhythm, the same gentle awareness that characterized journeys long ago. Stones, silent but present, continue to shape pace, perception, and mindfulness, reminding those who walk slowly that endurance and attention are lasting companions. The lesson of the stones is thus timeless. Their presence teaches that the story is made not only in grand events, but in the patient accumulation of small actions. Placement, care, observation, and step-by-step movement contribute to enduring legacy. Pilgrims, villagers, and travelers learn to notice, to respect, and to integrate with the stones, understanding that quiet persistence often outlasts ambition, and that gentle guidance often leaves the deepest mark. The road, stones, seasons, and human presence together form a quiet narrative, accessible to anyone willing to move slowly, notice carefully, and walk with The stone's endurance also emphasizes the poetry of simplicity. Unlike monuments erected with grandeur or ceremony, these markers reveal that quiet, practical actions, placing a stone, aligning a path, maintaining a trail, can shape experience, memory, and guidance across generations. Travelers' internalizations of patience, observation, and presence in direct contact with these markers, integrating physical, mental, and emotional awareness into their journey. The quiet legacy is therefore active, instructive, and experiential. It lives not only in sight, but in touch, movement, and reflection. The final reflection upon these stones is of continuity, presence, and care. Pilgrims long departed left footprints and stories. Villagers tended landscapes. Natural cycles altered surfaces and surroundings. Yet the stones themselves persisted, silent but instructive. Travelers today, stepping carefully along these paths, contribute their own rhythms, attention, and awareness, reinforcing centuries of continuity. The legacy is not in grand achievement, record, or fame, but in the slow, deliberate cultivation of presence, endurance, and observation values mirrored in the stones themselves. The quiet of the path, punctuated by the enduring presence of stones, invites a deepening of attention. One notices texture, alignment, moss, grooves, and subtle inclines. One notes the rhythm of footfall, breath, and heart. One notices the interplay of seasons, light, shadow, and movement. Even brief awareness enriches experience, embedding a sense of continuity and reflection. Pilgrims, past and present, connect through these markers, experiencing history as a living rhythm rather than static fact. Stones, as guides and companions, facilitate this process, allowing the journey to unfold gently, meditatively, and attentively. And so, long after the pilgrims have moved on, the stones endure. They remind travelers that guidance need not be overt, presence need not be loud, and impact need not be immediate. Their quiet perseverance teaches that history is often subtle, endurance often patient, and observation often rewarding. A single stone beside a path, worn by countless foots and softened by weather, may seem ordinary, yet it carries within it centuries of purpose, reflection, and continuity. In the end, the road and its markers leave the deepest impression, not through spectacle, but through their steady, enduring, and gentle presence, guiding travelers still, step by step, stone by stone. As we reach the end of our journey along the ancient pilgrimage roads, it is worth pausing, letting the images, sounds, and textures we have traced settle gently in the mind. The roads themselves, lined with enduring stones, whisper of centuries, of quiet footsteps, of lives lived in rhythm with the land and with devotion. These stones, though small and unassuming, carry the weight of countless travelers, each moving at their own pace, each leaving a trace, however slight, on both earth and memory. There is a profound calm in realizing that history is not only recorded in grand monuments or celebrated deeds, but in the simple, enduring gestures of everyday life, the placing of a stone, the sharing of bread, the steady act of walking along a path with purpose yet without. The legacy of these pilgrimage roads is as much about the people as it is about the stones themselves. Travelers came with varied intentions, some seeking spiritual solace, some embarking on personal reflection, some simply moving from one village to the next, but all experienced the same rhythm of the journey. Early mornings brought quiet, misted landscapes and the hush of half-light, where the cool stones beneath their feet held both history and guidance. By midday, inns and wayside cottages offered rest, meals, and soft human presence, the smell of hearth fires blending with the scent of bread, herbs, and summer fields. Each season added texture: spring's blossoms and birdsong, summer's warmth and rivers, autumn's fallen leaves and wood smoke, and winter's hush and frost-covered paths. Across all this, the stones remained patient, silent, and enduring, teaching travelers the art of steady movement and mindful observation. In thinking about these journeys, one realizes how deeply human connection and quiet companionship shaped experience. Travelers walking alone were never truly isolated. The rhythm of footsteps, the touch of stones, the occasional shared meal or fire, and even the awareness of past pilgrims' presence created a continuum of connection. Villagers along the way offered simple hospitality, tending to the mundane rhythms of life, while also forming threads of welcome, and the small rituals, pausing at a shrine, tracing a carved name on a stone, or listening to the distant tolling of a church bell added layers of meaning, reminding travelers that attention to small details cultivates mindfulness, gratitude, and reflection. These are the elements that persist across centuries, quiet yet profound. Food, too, played a subtle but important role in sustaining both body and spirit. Simple meals of bread, cheese, dried fruit, or lentil stew nourished travelers, not as indulgent feasts, but as consistent, comforting ritual. The act of breaking bread beneath a tree, beside a stream, or near a fire became a moment of pause, a gentle reflection on sustenance and generosity. Sharing food with fellow travelers, or offering small portions to strangers, reinforced quiet bonds of community. In these moments, one begins to sense that the pilgrimage was not only about reaching a destination, but also about inhabiting a rhythm of life, shaped by attention to simple necessities and small acts of care. The tools of the traveler staff, satchel, waterskin, and worn shoes, illustrated a philosophy of simplicity and endurance. These objects were not possessions in the sense of accumulation or wealth. They were carefully chosen instruments of movement, attuned to both practicality and mindfulness. In the weight of a satchel or the smoothness of a staff worn by countless hands, the pilgrim found comfort and guidance. Objects, like the stones themselves, carry memory of use, of passage, of quiet, attention sustained over long hours and across years. The lesson is subtle yet enduring. What is essential is not quantity or grandeur, but suitability, care, and presence. As the day progressed along these roads, the environment offered both guidance and reflection. Rivers murmured, fields swayed, hedgerows rustled, and birdsong provided soft accompaniment. The interplay of human and natural elements created an immersive tapestry of rhythm, movement, and awareness. Stone sanctuared these experiences, marking paths, distances, and places for rest. Travelers learned to pace themselves according to terrain, season, and light, becoming attuned not only to their surroundings, but also to their own physical and mental rhythms. Walking became meditation, awareness, and practice, each step layered with meaning. Night, as we have observed, deepened these lessons. Darkness, far from being threatening, offered calm and quiet reflection. Moonlight illuminated stones, firelight cast gentle shadows, and the sounds of nocturnal life, the rustle of leaves, distant animal calls, and flowing streams created a delicate symphony of subtle presence. Pilgrims rested, observed, and walked, attuning themselves to the slow pulse of night. Silence, in this context, was not emptiness but fullness, the fullness of history, memory, and attention, woven together by the enduring rhythm of human movement and the steadfast presence of stones. The legacy of these roads, and particularly of the stones, is therefore both practical and poetic. They provide orientation in space and time, offer comfort, mark milestones, and teach patience. At the same time, they embody a quiet poetry, endurance, persistence, and gentle guidance. Stones remind us that human history is not only the story of great leaders or dramatic events, but also of the careful, consistent acts of countless ordinary people. The laying of a stone, the sharing of a meal, the placing of a footstep along a worn path, these are the threads of a living, breathing history. Even today, modern travelers who walk these ancient paths can sense their calm, layered legacy. Moss-covered, weathered, and softened by time, the stones continue to guide, to anchor attention, and to teach mindfulness. Pilgrims of the past and hikers of the present share an invisible bond, a recognition that movement through space is also movement through thought, observation, and reflection. Each step becomes a meditation, each pause a conversation with history, and each stone a reminder that guidance, care, and patience are in. Ultimately, the pilgrimage roads teach that history is not always loud or dramatic. The deepest legacies are often quiet, subtle, and continuous. They are lessons embedded in routine, rhythm, and small, thoughtful actions. Travelers learn endurance, mindfulness, gratitude, and connection, not through spectacle, but through steady repetition and gentle observation. Stones, paths, rivers, forests, inns, meals, and companions scholarly shape an enduring story, one that transcends centuries, reminding us that the quiet rhythms of daily life carry a weight of meaning often overlooked. As we reflect on this journey, the final thought is one of gentle presence. Stones remain, roads persist, and the lessons of the past endure in subtle ways. Pilgrims walked, rested, observed, and reflected, leaving echoes not in monuments but in the ongoing rhythm of travel and attention. These echoes continue to resonate, step by step, stone by stone, breath by breath. The roads teach patience, endurance, reflection, and gratitude, inviting all who walk them to slow, notice, and inhabit both space and time fully. In closing, the pilgrimage roads and their stones embody a philosophy of life, that meaning is often found in quiet consistency, that guidance is gentle, and that presence matters more than haste. Across centuries, the hive borne witness to human devotion, endurance, companionship, and observation. They remind us that the most enduring legacies are those that invite participation, attention, and care, not spectacle or grandeur, and its stones continue to offer lessons for all who pause, look, and walk carefully, teaching that rhythm of simple steps, guided by enduring markers, carries us not only through space, but also through understanding, reflection, and gentle connection with history itself.